Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Silver Spook, and this is the Silver Spook video about Blood Quantum 500 Years of Apocalypse. And that's the movie Blood Quantum. There's also the terrible policy that's also called Blood Quantum. But anyway, Blood Quantum is a native made survival horror movie based on the survival horror history of living under settler colonial genocide and the end of the colonial capitalist North America. So, Blood Quantum is a show that you can get on Shudder. I believe it's a Shudder original, but you can get it on YouTube and you can get it on Amazon. You can rent it all over the place, wherever videos and streaming services provide those services. And Blood Quantum, as far as I know, you don't have to enter you don't have to re-enter your Netflix password to get it. They won't have a survival streaming horror. The Netflix just rolled back their policy of where they're going to have each account can only be showing films from a single household. But anyways, all Netflix fiasco jokes aside, Blood Quantum can be seen anywhere. I highly recommend anybody watch it because it's especially if you are into zombie apocalypse dystopian shows. I just did a video about The Last of Us fairly recently, and I hope I'm actually live right now. That looks like I'm okay. The actual the menu and what's also a horror movie, and then also did a video about the Last of Us, which is very popular right now. So if you like The Last of Us, if you like the menu, Blood Quantum is very much like in those veins. It's a zombie horror show. It's a movie. It's about it's not a TV show, so it's like you watch it in one sitting. And I think the Blood Quantum is probably the best zombie movie, the best dystopian apocalyptic movie I've seen in like. It's probably actually I just want to say Blood Quantum is like the best dystopian movie ever. I'm just gonna say that. It's like Reservation Dogs. In fact, indigenous actress Devery Jacobs, who I think is right there. I think I'm getting that IMDb entry correct. But Holly will correct my errors if I did not. I am correct. Okay, so Devery Jacobs is also in Reservation Dogs, which of course I've done multiple videos about on this channel. Reservation Dogs is a send up of Reservoir Dogs, and it's also a very it's a send up of Reservation Dogs, and it's from a native indigenous perspective. It's set in the reservation of the indigenous peoples in so-called Oklahoma, and their trials and tribulations, and it deals with just like it's more of a dramedy, I would say, co-produced by two indigenous people, Taika Waititi and Scarlett Harjo, and it was is it Sterling Harjo? I can never remember. I'm sorry. I'm gonna go to the Oscar Awards, and I like to thank Oscar the Grouch. Oh wait, I like to thank Darth Vader. I'm gonna get everything wrong. So, anyways, I'm gonna stop sidetracking myself. So when the Reservation Dogs show is a show about native life, indigenous life, from a very realistic perspective, right? Which is like eating a lot of hot chips, flaming Cheetos, living in poverty and in abject destitution, unfortunately enforced by settler colonial capitalism and the attempted eradication of your people. But it's not just about it's about like trying to get a man when you're 40 years old and you're listening to TLC to go out to the local club, and you're listening to Don't Go Chasing Waterfalls and your brandy when you're a 40-year-old auntie working for the Indian Health Services, trying trying to keep the community together. And then you're named after Elora Danan from Willow, and then you're going out to do a badly thought out mini heist because you watch too many American heist movies and Ocean's 27 or whatever one they're on right now. And then you go out and you steal a delivery truck full of flaming hot chips and Mountain Dew, and then you sell the chips one bag at a time to make enough money to go to California. Anyway, so that was the Reservation Dogs. This is very funny. It's kind of the opposite of this show, but it's definitely a show that's from a native indigenous person inside the United States perspective. And so Blood Quantum is it takes place in so-called Canada, or North Turtle Island, as we like to say. And so but it's basically it's very similar sort of show from that perspective. It's the basic synopsis of it is that, let me see if I can get the actual synopsis right here. So basically in Blood Quantum, it's a I keep hearing sound coming out of you. Sorry. Blood Quantum is a show that is, the premise is that the dead are coming back to life outside of isolated Micmac reserve of Red Crow, and except for indigenous inhabitants who are gonna have to pause that. Wait, actually stop. The dead are coming back to life outside the isolated Micmac reserve of Red Crow, except for indigenous inhabitants who are strangely immune to the zombie plague. So basically, everyone except indigenous people is becoming zombified. They're turning into flesh-eating, undead, walking teeth with no brains, looking to eat your brains, right? So, actually, and it begins interestingly with one of the elders is the grandfather character is fishing, and then he catches some fish and he's gutting the fish, and it's kind of like there's this kind of a foreboding, ominous, squishy metaphors. Like you see all the guts coming out of the fish, but it's like that's what you do when you're when you're catching a fish. I've caught fish and I've had to do the gutting process because that's what you do when you're doing your normal harvesting of food in your indigenous territory, or just fishing generally. And but then the fish that have been gutted with their intestines and all their innards removed suddenly start flipping around. So they have all their insides, their dead fish, everything's gone, and they just start flopping around, and it's like, what is happening here? And then there's dogs that are like losing their minds, and they're just attacking everyone. And so there's all these dog bites, and it starts off like in the beginning of Blood Quantum, you kind of have this pan over this super polluted Western city that's just like dumping toxic waste, and there's the black tar sands gunk is just like spilling into the native water. I don't know, like take your pick, DAPL, Wet'suwet'en. There's so many struggles that are ongoing. Hawaii, the U.S. military dumping jet fuel in our water here. They just spilled 700 gallons. The United States Air Force space farce, space clown wannabe Luke Skywalker spilled 700 gallons of diesel on Haleakala, our sacred mountain on Maui. That's yesterday. I can't keep track of how many times these Western colonizers are spilling jet fuel and oil all over the place. But anyways, so you have this kind of picture of the city, and it's like the townies, they're called, like on the other side of this bridge, right? So the colonizer townies are, you kind of see, and so it's kind of a metaphor where like the environmentally destructive, disrespectful, just horrendous system of colonialism, capitalism that plunders, right, for profit and for the few, and then it's destroying the environment with just no care for the ecology, no care for other people, no care for certainly not indigenous people. In fact, trying to eradicate the indigenous people to this very second, in fact. And so, but the toxic oil is kind of implied. Nobody really says that in the movie, but it's like it's definitely an allegory, right? Which is that the toxins of really settler colonial culture of North America is like seeping into the water. It's infecting the fish, and the fish. I think Gary Farmer, who's also in this, says at one point, um, this plague is this disease is our mother, right? That's the way that we indigenous people see the earth, right? Our mother is the earth, right? Is upset. She can't stand. She can't tolerate these people anymore, and by she means white people, obviously. She's finally found she's like, and so she's like it's kind of like the earth is sending out this plague. White people who eat the infected fish and dogs, or get bit by a bear that's infected, or another person, only white people can be infected. If they get bitten or eat or consume any of the toxified animals, they themselves become zombies. Or and so Earth is actually creating this no, it's not confirmed, but that's what Gary Farmer, one of the native characters, is saying. Like, these people just have to the Earth is wiping them out using its own natural viruses. Pandemic did kill more people in settler colonial. Fun fact: the Blackfoot were the most. I mean, just in terms of the COVID-19 COVID-19 viral pandemic, the indigenous peoples were disproportionately vaccinated and prepared, and distrusted Western capitalist ideas, and they didn't trust when Donald Trump said this is just a little cold, it's a little flu. They didn't trust any of these people because they knew that they had been lied to. Well, they had been lied to. We had been lied to forever and ever and ever. And you go back to your own history of biological warfare. And so, long story short, the Blackfoot were, in 2021, they were the most vaccinated per capita of any. If they were a country, they would be the most vaccinated place in the world. That was one indigenous. That's just one anecdotal indigenous community, right? That was prepared for that. And white countries like the United States, colonizer countries, United States, European countries, Canada, had the worst outcomes. Millions and millions of people dead, millions more permanently disabled. The long COVID in places like, for example, China, is actually, they're saying they're not seeing it. In places like Cuba and Vietnam and indigenous regions, even though the U.S. literally gave body bags to native people, right? They're like, we're going to kill you with this virus. That's what both Trump and Biden continue the policy of attempted genocide using biological warfare. But, it's kind of like the indigenous people were prepared. So I could go into that. I'm going to try to come back to that maybe later. I have a whole Resident Evil and biological warfare video that you can watch if you want to learn about that on this YouTube channel. But indigenous people were prepared and were not disproportionately not harmed by the virus of COVID-19. Even though I take that back. Like, where the virus did get in, it was harder for indigenous people to get health services, and we still do suffer the most disproportionate harm, and we have shorter life expectancies due to the colonial capitalist ways, environmental racism, et cetera, et cetera. But that also means that we're more prepared, because we know that the United States, Canada, Western countries, capitalist world, right, doesn't care about us, is trying to kill us all the time. It's trying to wipe us out. It's literally banned Hawaiian language or culture like it banned native languages, right? So we don't anything that the U.S. and Canada do is immediately, and any Western entity does, by extension, all of the capitalist Western world, anything that it attempts to do is immediately suspect. So, anyway, so in the movie, it definitely has that resonance on one level of just indigenous people surviving the pandemic. Remember there's those stories where indigenous communities were like, white colonizers are trying to get into native territory. to get away from the COVID-19, or they're trying to like go into reservation areas, and then indigenous people were like blockading the roads and bridges in and out of their reservations because they're like, you're not coming in here, you're not spreading COVID-19 in here, we don't have any medical resources because you all under resource us and try to wipe us out at every turn. You're not going to come into our reservation. So there's like in the sense of like zombies invading a space, right? Or some kind of monstrous force invade. Like that's a lot of the topic of, when we go into zombie movies, The Last of Us. I can't stand how many American flags are in The Last of Us. That's one problem I have with it. There's American flags all over the goddamn place. And it's often like what they're kind of saying, like most dystopian apocalyptic zombie movies, right? And I kind of making that point the other week. It's always about the Western dystopian movie, right, is about individualistic, personal survival, right? And everyone around you is your enemy. Basically, don't organize with your community, don't get together, don't work with anyone, because nobody is trustworthy. It's just you and your family, right? I was talking about that like last week, I think. And it's all American flags. It's all selfish individualism. It's capitalism. It's kind of a metaphor for, it's kind of like the Ayn Rand anti-communist Hollywood manifesto, but for like the zombie 21st century, where it's like everything's falling apart. Don't get together and try to overthrow the capitalist system that's eating you alive. Don't try to dismantle white supremacy and colonialism. Just get in your individual little suburb house, get a bunch of guns and ammo and food, and let everything fall apart. And then eventually you all just eat and start. Because actually, that's not really a solution, right? That was the topic of last week. And so The Last of Us, while it's The Last of Us it's a fine show, like as a just as a dystopian show for its cinematic and its acting and the writing and the editing. I mean, that's all fine, that's all fine. But like in terms of the message, right? I was saying it's about individualism. It's very Western. It's very like the apocalypse of the West. It's about zombies are going to come from my suburb, right? Nick Offerman's character. And that's fine. Like it's a very touching, good queer story. And I'm glad that there's some representation for, and Nick Offerman gets to do some more serious acting and not just rehash Ron Swanson from the, what is that show? The Parks and Rec again. But The Last of Us, it's still about protecting you, just yourself and your personal family, your personal property, stopping invaders coming in to the United States. It's very clear. It's the United States is what needs to be defended, right? And as a settler colonial capitalist genocidal planetary murdering project, I can't, abide by that, as the United States is literally killing Native Hawaiians like myself. And not just the United States is killing Americans also. There are 70 million people. Anyway, I don't want to rattle all the statistics off, but in case you need that dose of reality, watch any one of the thousands of hours of Silver Spook streams, and I'm sure you'll get it. The point is that like Blood Quantum it's not about it doesn't center the settler colonial genocide doer and beneficiary of inherited wealth, land and resources that is propagating global capitalism, right? It's the Blood Quantum is a show that centers the people who have survived, as I said, right? Survived an actual horror, the survival horror movie about an actual survival horror history, right? Which is the 500 years of apocalypse, right? The end of the world. That's what the end of the world is not for Western people, for white people. The end of the world is something projected into the future that might happen, right? It's dystopian science fiction about what might happen in this metaphysical, imaginary, and nonsensical and inaccurate sense, I would argue, right? When dystopia and cyberpunk dystopia is when there's drugs and sex workers and the streets have trash blowing around. They already have trash blowing around them. Drugs exist. White people do more drugs than anyone else. It's like, but dystopia is this imaginary thing in the colonizer, virus addled, the Western virus addled colonizer brain is just full of this incorrect information and storytelling, right, about what could and might happen, when in fact the dystopia is already here. It's just that you're not, the people that are experiencing it disproportionately are the people that are furthest from the privilege, right? So the native people, black people, obviously, if you're trans, you're literally classified as a disease, and you're by the United States, and you're being eradicated systematically, like literally, like there are laws being passed that make it illegal to be trans. There's already a don't say gay, don't be gay laws. They're trying to systematically wipe out those people, and like they have always been trying to systematically wipe out indigenous people and people of color generally, and black people, and even more so people in Africa, people outside of the imperial geographic areas that are called the Western countries. If you're outside, it gets even worse. If you're in Africa, if you're in Asia, if you're in Latin America, if you're in the Pacific, outside of if you're in an actual war zone area, then you are even in far worse conditions. U.S. trying to start a war zone in the Philippines, Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and anywhere else they can get going right at this very second. They're doubling the bases. So for those people, it's always been the apocalypse, right? For the Vietnamese, the apocalypse has been for the last several hundred years, and it definitely was another little apocalypse when the United States invaded Vietnam and murdered millions of people and just laughed about it, and they just like, oh, yeah, we lied everyone into this war, and people died. Americans died. Way more Vietnamese died and starved to death, and then have been suffering chemical degradation and mass birth defects and Agent Orange, and then being forced to pay all of that back. But who cares? And then America has the gall to imagine what it would be like if society collapsed. Society collapses every day around the world. Dystopia, the apocalypse is happening every day around the world in some or usually more than one country. Right now it's Ukraine. That the United States also caused that, by the way. Right? And it's getting harder and harder for them to cloak their zombie Nazis, right? Because now they're all out in the daylight with their swastikas, right? But the Western colonizer world is about creating constant apocalypses for everyone else, and even for their own people, but to a lesser extent, to make them seem better, and then telling these bullshit stories about how, oh, what if Skynet, and then there's an apocalypse? Oh, what if there's a virus that gets created somewhere? Obviously, it's the United States that has literally hundreds of biolabs across the world, including dozens and dozens in Ukraine alone, till they got denazified and de-imperialist and de-capitalismified. They still have biolabs that are cooking up genetically targeted strains of H1N3 avian bird flu that have been mutated to target Russian and Chinese, or specifically Russian Slavic DNA, specifically in Ukraine. So, right, that's what Resident Evil is about the people who ended up working in labs in Japan creating viruses to target Chinese DNA, specifically to wipe them out, because that's what the United States does. Right, and it puts the labs in Japan, and it puts them in Europe, and it puts them in Ukraine, and it puts them away from the. Why does the U.S. put the labs there? Because the United States is trying to make the apocalypse farther from their homeland as possible, right? Or further from like D.C. and the Hamptons up there and the WASP land, right? But the United States doesn't really care about its population either, and that's why it has Fort Detrick, and that's why it has Camp Lejeune dropping toxic PFAS and giving 25 different cancers to its own soldiers. So, but it cares. There's the tiers of uncaring. That's what you have. You have tiers of apocalypse. So if you're a white American, you have this level of apocalypse. If you're Native Hawaiian, you get to like just literally live in a cesspool. And then if you're in the out of the U.S. empire inside of its sacrifice zones in the war zones, then you just get drone bombed when you're 3 years old looking at the blue sky in Afghanistan or Vietnam, Iraq, Syria. So there's tiers of apocalypse, and nobody, that are constantly happening at every second of the day for the last several hundred years, and really for the last 2,000 years. And so that's kind of, and so that's I'm expanding far out from the movie, obviously, at this point, but that's what I mean by, at the 10,000 mile up aerial view, 500 years of apocalypse. The second that those Mayflower ships, the second that those unwashed, hygiene-free, selfish, murderous child killers and rapists like Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, who wanted to sell black people to Africa to make money. So he was the slightly less bad of horrendous evils, which is to say terrible. And we're supposed to celebrate that guy for African, Black History Month, or African Liberation Month, as our friend and African person Big Teal calls it. So the second that anybody touched down in the United States, in North America, or Turtle Island, or South America for that matter, or anywhere else, that the second that happened, that was the beginning of the apocalypse, right? People were driven off the land. Our people were driven off the land, given smallpox blankets, the early forms of biological warfare, and then annuit coeptis, as I bring up a very important Latin phrase that means it approves, meaning God approves. And the Christian Europeans celebrated the deaths of the indigenous, took the land, and began immediately chopping down all of the multi-thousand-year sustainable old-growth forests, accumulating wealth, bringing black slaves to accumulate more wealth under the capitalist system that is, unfortunately, probably terminally European. The United States has formally declared this week, right? You might remember that. The Congress passed a overwhelming both-party resolution that the United States denounces socialism. So the United States is Europe. Europe is just a puppet of the United States at this point. Europe really invaded Turtle Island and built its new Euro core in the United States. You shouldn't really call Americans America. They should be called Euro settlers. America is based on Amerigo Vespucci, some Italian colonizer who assisted murderers like Columbus in his mission to pour boiling soap down the throats of indigenous people for not bringing him enough gold. And so that it's really that the whole the America is not really the name. It should not really be the name of North, Central, and South America, but we call it that because that's what we got to put up with now. But nations are built by mass collective reinforcement in the minds of the billions of people of Earth. And so, eventually, that's why we bring up, that's just like, Taika Waititi always says Aotearoa New Zealand, and I say the illegally occupied country of Hawaii. There's no such thing as a state of Hawaii, and so-called Canada and so-called United States. The United States is a figment in the mind of the people based on the world's most horrific planetary empire that is literally committed all the most heinous war crimes over the last 100 years, certainly. And it has 800 military bases in almost every country on the earth, right? And the belief in the United States of America is what creates the reality in people's minds of the United States of America. But there's not really any United States, only in the sense that people accept it in their minds. So part of that is, the people use it and other people interact with and confirm it. It's kind of like, is there a Taiwan, right? Technically, even the United States, you look at the State Department website, they'll say Taiwan is part of China. They're trying to, right, with their massive multi-trillion-dollar planetary imperial and all of the Death Star satellites, which is every corporate media distribution, education, the entire education system, all the Western media, and everything that the CIA and the State Department run and manage. And every so-called journalist is constantly putting out articles about Taiwan, its own country, Taiwan's own country. Almost every country on the earth doesn't recognize that it's not, right? But the United States is trying to manufacture, right? This is an example, right? if the United States can manufacture a fictional reality that Taiwan, just by blasting information down people's eyeballs and ear holes, right? It's like literally, it's not really 1,000 lies makes a truth. It's trillions and trillions and trillions of news articles, text stories, video broadcasts, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, water cooler conversations, the entire education system, right? K-12 and college, blasting a thing down your eye hole and your ear holes. That makes it the truth. Or it can be unmade, right? So if the U.S. can make Taiwan a country based just by blasting it into everybody's ears, they can make Ukraine some kind of valiant liberation struggle just by blasting that down your eye holes, and then erase the fact that it's a U.S.-backed Nazi coup that was literally committing genocide. Speaking of apocalypse, right? There's apocalypse in Europe right now, and the U.S. just like made it into some fraudulently manufactured liberation struggle through controlling the radio, the radio waves, the social media waves. That's why they want to get rid of TikTok, and all of the planetary information sources, the knowledge production process or knowledge distribution storytelling process, right? And so if they can, all of academia is also obviously complicit in that. So long story short, so when we talk about apocalypse, what counts as apocalypse, that is also a war. You know, it's a cultural, informational, narrative war. What is apocalypse? Is apocalypse when the United States falls apart? The United States is in shambles already, right? It's just very good at telling its own people that everything's hunky-dory and fine and keep calm and carry on. Meanwhile, 100 million people are food insecure. 65% of the population is at or in poverty, or is about one broken soul, new pair of shoe expense away from abject poverty. Even if you're not in poverty, you can't get access to health care. People are dying from the $600 insulin. People are, like, the United States is in flames. They're like shooting environmental land defenders out of trees at this point. That's how bad it is. They're white ones too. So the U.S. is like the U.S. is banning entire books from schools, just de facto, no books. They're like Fahrenheit 451 is already happening. Speaking of dystopia, speaking of apocalypse, right? Ray Bradbury, a fascist authoritarian nightmare cautionary tale, where Guy Montag goes and burns all the books in schools. You already have this, not just DeSantis. Critical race theory is banned in 42 states out of 50. Banned. DeSantis is the tip of the massive iceberg that's a million times bigger. The United States is already gone in a lot of senses. It's gone. That's why he's trying to start a ridiculous war, doubling bases in the Philippines and trying to get the Shinzo Abe worshippers to do fascist Japan 2.0 in against China, because the United States is gone already. It's gone already. It's like the Fallout 2 bunkered, the 25 cloistered, cabinet members that survived the nuclear apocalypse with the president and a bunch of, battle armored mech dudes with guns, right? Trying to badly and brain fog addledly maintain the whatever remains of their ridiculous hegemony with their broken weapons. The U.S. couldn't win a war on China even if it tried to shoot down the balloons that it can't even shoot down. The Navy pointed out the U.S. Navy has actually tried to shoot down Venus multiple times, thinking that it was either a Chinese, a Russian, or a French spy balloon at different points in time. The U.S. is a multi-trillion-dollar fiasco, and all of Europe is just going along with it, and that's why it's all going to get denazified and demilitarized soon. But that's for maybe later on. I'll talk more about that. So the idea that the apocalypse is, my point is, the idea that the apocalypse is coming, dystopia is coming, it's something in the future. This is one of the major frauds. This is a very important. It's very important, actually. Like, if I was gonna run the empire, I will keep running shows like The Last of Us. I will keep blasting everyone with Western apocalypse realism, right? It's capitalist colonial Western matrix prison of this thing is coming, buy more ammo, get away from your friends, don't join organizations in your community is going to eat you when the world goes to shit, pull into yourself, get ammo, get under your ground, build a bunker in your house, get a bunch of MREs, get far away from everyone else, and don't listen to the wokeists, don't listen to the other people, don't listen to the rest of the world. Bunker into your own little house with your own little radio. Listen to right-wing Alex Jones, 2.0. Listen to these people, right? Because we're going to need you to kill all the leftists what the U.S. wants is it wants all of its white fascists, just white settler colonizers who don't want to dismantle racism, and they just complain that there's too much cancel culture. It wants to get all those people ready to wipe out whatever remains it's like an internal Ukrainian Nazi / Japanese fascist army to wipe out. It's like inside Ukraine war, right? To be clear, the two countries that have not voted to ban to stand against racism, Nazism, and xenophobia are the United States and Ukraine. This stuff, when it comes to the actual facts, you just look up it's easy to find these information. The CIA.gov has the grand chessboard. You want to know what the United States is going to do and what it's been doing? It's in the grand chessboard on CIA.gov. They have this shit. You can go find this stuff out. It's actually interesting because it's not really that, it's not a secret. You can go ask John Mearsheimer. You ask any of these people, they'll tell you. They might not tell you straight to your face. They'll be like, who the fuck are you? But they say it all the time. Yeah, we're just going to try to stop Russia and China, and we're going to try to eradicate and maintain our power, stomp on indigenous, non-capitalist socialists in the United States. It's all native people. We're going to crush Peru. We're going to crush Venezuela. We're going to crush Cuba. That's why we're embargoing them. Because the West is capitalist. The West is racist. France is over there. I was reading an article about France. Le wokisme, right? They're like, we are, the problem is, meanwhile, all your black and Muslim people are rotting in prison, and you're like, you are, approving the hundreds of people that are dying all the time on a black and Asian or Afro-Asian people dying between Turkey and Greece in the water. Every European country is complicit in that. So every European country is part of that apocalypse. The United States as a country is an apocalypse, that is telling these stories. Europe is an apocalypse telling these stories about how they're free, liberal, democratic countries, right? That are going to stop apocalypse. The apocalypse is when Russians show up. No, when Russians show up, that's the end of the imperial capitalist occupation. When the Chinese show up, that was what helped liberate Korea, actually. And then the U.S. said, well, let's try to starve them now. There's literal free housing, universal healthcare, and universal university. There are no such thing as mortgages or rents in North Korea. Just a fun fact for you. If you're a family of 4, you are assigned a 3-bedroom house. If the parents are a nurse and an electrician, you're assigned a house that's within walking distance or less than 20-minute driving distance, or train distance, because they have trains now that are very well. Look at China; they have 50,000 kilometers of high-speed rail. The U.S. can't figure out how to build 2 miles of any speed rail without it falling apart. You're assigned a place to live. There's no housing costs. There's no housing payment period. There's no spending $500 to apply for a mortgage, to $500 just to send in to a landlord your rental tenant application, right? So there's no rent. There's no rent, period. There's no rent. Can you imagine this? There is no rent. There are no mortgages. That has never existed in any Western country. Let me say that again. That has never existed in any Western country, because every Western country is an apocalyptic capitalist colonizer hellscape. That's why. And then the people are told that that's just how humanity is. That's just how everything is terrible. Everything is a dystopia. This is just like normal, liberal, progressive, advanced democracy, is where there are hundreds of thousands or millions of homeless people in the street, and you're all living jam-packed 25 people to a house. Even in the terrible circumstances that the imperialist capitalist West has put places like Korea and Vietnam into, they still managed to surpass and stop. And Cuba as well, Cuba is just the closest one. Cuba also, right? All the housing there is subsidized. the prices are controlled. Richard Wolff as a for the left Marxist, Western academic left progressives, just as an example, Cuba. Richard Wolff talks about inflation is because the corporations are constantly increasing their prices on your eggs, on your cars, on your batteries, on your toilet paper, right, on your semiconductors. Well, if you didn't fucking do a trade war and destroy 55% of the planet's semiconductor supply coming out of Taiwan with your stupid war and your proxy and hybrid wars, maybe you wouldn't be, running out of millions of GM trucks worth of transistors. But there's no sanity along with no morals in the West. So if your prices on all of these computers and your eggs are going up, it's because, and also your rent is going up because the owners of the property are raising the prices. Well, what's the answer to that? The answer to that is a people, actual democratic, in the sense of manifesting and operating by the will of the people for the needs and the interests of the people, right? Of the people. A government that controls the prices of everything, which is what Vietnam has. There are very strict rice price controls, food price controls, very strict medicine controls. It's $4 insulin and it doesn't move. What are you paying in the U.S.? $600-$700 for insulin? You're paying $8 to have a blue check mark on Twitter, and you're paying $3,000 a month to rent a tiny 2-bedroom next to the meth lab above the highway, and the pet rats are free in New York City. So, people can't afford anything anywhere, right? And so, but the answer to that is price controls, which is what actual places that are not Western capitalist hellscapes are. But you can't know that. You can never know that, right? Because part of understand, if you understood that, it's another way to think about it is Cuba and China and Vietnam are post-apocalyptic, or they are rebuilt, revitalized they have exited the apocalypse, and now they're just in normal human civilization, right? The United States is in situ apocalyptic, and especially, and as I said, it's a tiered apocalypse, so it's especially apocalyptic for the indigenous people and the black people and the black trans person in particular, even more so, right? And for women generally, it's always been the apocalypse, ever since Aristotle, with his genius white man brain, said women are inferior to men and women must serve men, otherwise he literally said chaos will dominate this world, and that's Jordan Peterson, right? So there's always been apocalypse for people who present with longer hair and identify as women, and certainly for people that are capable of giving birth. Then your body that gives birth is just a white man military soldier factory. That's all your uterus is for, and that's why they want to control it, to make sure you keep popping out. The future, the U.S. and the West always needs their women to keep popping out the future fascists, right, that will have to kill all of the people who try to build just normal non-apocalypse civilizations. They're called communists, they're called socialists, they're called, etc. So that's why the uterus is there to keep, the white uterus is there to keep popping out more white people. Literally, that's Aristotle, Plato, that's all of Europe, that's French, that's Britain for the last several hundred years, and that's the United States to the very second. And that's why the U.S. and Ukraine get together, and the U.S., Ukraine, the German Nazis that the Nazi Atlantic Treaty Organization, also known as NATO, installed into Germany, went into hiding for the last 7 years. Now they're back out, right? Sending big cat named tanks to kill Russians, just like they did in World War II. And then they're in Japan, right, with their Japanese fascist Emperor Shinzo Abe worshippers trying to retake parts of Siberia and whatever they can get of the Asian continent. Because the U.S. always needs you to be pumping out the U.S. needs you to be popping out zombies and the West needs you to be popping out from your reproductive organs more zombies and that's actually an important part of Blood Quantum, right? Which is that there's a woman said, I don't want to have this child. What's going to happen to this child? This child could eat me from the inside out, right? Or it's kind of a Ridley Scottian alien xenomorph horror part of it, where it's like there is a child that is a native father and a white mother, and she's like, I don't know if I can have. I don't want to have this child. Cause like, what if this child is the end? Like, what if this child is the half white, half native child? Because every native person is immune to the zombies, right? What if this child is not immune? And then if this child has more children, then all of the future children will have their blood quantum, right? And that's where blood quantum comes from, right? Because blood quantum, right? If you don't know what blood quantum is, you can look it up, okay? But I'll tell you what it is, okay? In the history of genocide of indigenous peoples, of the indigenous OG socialists and communists of the world that Karl Marx plagiarized, right? And the United States the U.S. war on communism is inside the United States against indigenous people, and it's outside the United States against Chinese communists, Russian communists, African communists, South Central American communists. But the West is capitalist through and through. It's selfish individualism. That's what Ayn Rand is correct. And I love it when the Republicans just say that thing out loud. You know, it makes it so much easier. You know, when the U.S. just comes out and says it. You know, I'll get to just. I want to just throw this up on the screen for a second. The blood quantum, right? What the American quantum in another sense, right? What identifies you as a Westerner, right? Shit, I posted so many tweets yesterday. I'm a tweeting maniac here. I gotta tweet less. Okay, what identifies you as an American is your capitalisticness. To be American is to be capitalist. This is the actual vote. Overwhelmingly, the United States House, the Congress, has voted to denounce socialism. And I appreciate that the Congress people, the Republicans have at least they have the courage to say who they are. The Democrats are capitalist. They feign towards, we're gonna have universal health care, and Bernie's over there talking about we're gonna tax the billionaires. These people are all. I hate Democrats more because they're the people that are more competent imperialists, as Ben Rhodes, Obama's cabinet member, once stated. I fucking hate those people. And also, the 99% of Hawaii is run by Democrats. I fucking can't stand these people. The Republicans are coming out, but not just Republicans, Democrats too. Everyone is coming out and saying who the U.S., right, the world's Western superpower, right, the Euro Western superpower, is saying we are capitalist. Socialism is not who we are. We denounce socialism. We kill socialism and socialists. That is what the U.S. did. That's what Douglas MacArthur took this entire planet's militaries, all 26, the NATO and AUKUS, the Indo-Pacific Command, all of the militaries of the Western liberal free world. And he waged anti-communist warfare against Korea, Vietnam, and the U.S. was smashing every time Haiti ever rose up, anytime everyone in Africa tried to get out of its forced underdevelopment in cooperation with communists in China, and etc. The U.S. has been waging a war against socialism, communism, anything that isn't selfish, individualistic, and small-minded and short-sighted. That's the Western way. Period. There was a debate in China 3,000 years ago. Right, that was the Confucian, or Mencius and Confucius. There was debates between them versus selfish individualists, and the collectivism won. And they said it is more important that we prioritize the well-being of all people, of all humanity. They said all humanity, and that's been their project. There's actually more Jewish communities during Nazism that survived in Shanghai and other parts of China. Far more when the West was kicking all of the Jewish people out. That's another history they've buried. China was taking all the Jewish people in, as the West and all of its fascists were murdering them or kicking all the Jews out. And the United States then, with Europe, with its Nazis and fascists that the U.S. put in power in Europe after Bretton Woods, after World War II, there has always been anti-communism, which is fascism, which is capitalism, which is Western. They should all be tied together, in fact. The United States will never be a socialist country. I thank the United States Congress for saying it out. Saying it out loud. Now you know who you are. Now you know. Now it's very clear, because This is actually very bad if you want to run an empire, because the empire and a capitalist disinforming win-lose way can only maintain power through mass confusion, right? Especially in a time when you have very strong collectivist, socialist, communist, huge powers like Russia, China, global South, the multipolar world, BRICS, etc. Right? Not every person in the BRICS is not every country in the BRICS is necessarily socialist, but you know what? People are being deconfused by this. So that's why when Trump was in office, that's when Black Lives Matter happened. When Trump was in office, that's when people were really like out in the streets doing what they needed to do, which is mass organization and to undo the capitalist, imperialist, plutocratic structures and try to dismantle white supremacy. Right? When the Democrats come into power, they're more competent. Everybody goes to sleep and they're like, oh, I guess we just vote AOC and maybe Bernie will have another run, and then nothing happens, and then it gets worse, right? So I want to just thank personally the United States Congress for making it very clear who the United States is, which is they are the apocalypse, right? Let me do some Aristotelian Socratic method for you, okay? Let's do a little bit of logic, okay? Let's just do a little bit, okay? Capitalism is killing the planet. It's time to stop buying into our... so this is from the Western rag, The Guardian. They have no interest in actually giving a crap about saying positive things about anti-capitalism. In fact, it's illegal to teach... You know this. It's illegal to teach anti-capitalism in British schools. I just want to point that out. You know, so Karl Marx and would be celebrating in his grave, and the the British industrialists that enclosed the serfs' land and put more profitable sheep on that territory are, they are not happy about this. But capitalism is killing the planet. It's time to stop buying into our own destruction. Instead of focusing on micro consumers bollocks like ditching our plastic coffee cups, we must challenge the pursuit of wealth and level down, not up. There's a myth anyway. So there's a myth about human beings that withstands all evidence, and that is that we always put our survival first. Speaking of zombie apocalypses. This is true of other species when confronted by an impending threat such as winter, they invest great resources to avoid or withstand it, migrating or hibernating, for example. Humans are a different matter. When faced with impending chronic threats such as climate or ecological breakdown, we seem to go out of our way to compromise our survival. I wanna say no, Westerners, which is to be capitalists, you do that. I want to de-universalize again, right? This is George Monbiot, who's not necessarily a bad guy, but the Western capitalist colonialist method is to one of their methods is to universalize everything that they've done and make all of climate change, all of destruction of the planet, all of the inequality a problem of humans. No, that's you are 10% of the world. Own your crimes, Europeans. Own your crimes. And like, not other people have their own problems that they have to own. But like, you just have more. I'm sorry. And especially in this moment when the native Hawaiians are struggling under, I don't want to fucking I get tired of rattling off all the goddamn statistics, but I feel like I have to. Otherwise, people are gonna go, Silver Spook is just some crazy tinfoil hat Hawaiian, and I don't know. I'm not gonna listen to him. I'm just gonna go step outside of my house and get shot by the police like the other 1,200 people last year. I guess I don't know. I'm gonna starve to death, unlike, the 1,000 times less per capita malnutrition deaths that Vietnam has. So anyways, just as two examples, when faced with an impending chronic threat, such as climate or ecological breakdown, we seem to go out of our way to compromise our survival. We convince ourselves that it's not so serious or even that it wasn't happening. We double down on, let me rewrite that. Westerners convince themselves that it's not so serious or that it isn't happening. Westerners double down on world destruction. The collective West swaps out ordinary cars for SUVs, jets to oblivion on a long-haul flight, burning up all in a frenzy. In the back of white minds, there's a voice whispering, if it were really so serious, someone would stop us. This does not apply to the Vietnamese. That doesn't apply to the Cubans. That doesn't apply to Native Hawaiians. No, we know there's serious problems. And we know that we have to do everything possible to our own material condition detriment. That's a problem with Marxism. It doesn't go deep enough in its analysis to the entire planet and the environmental reality. And taking care of your personal material conditions only is why Europe is a partner with the United States in destroying this earth, in fact. So, but anyway, but that's Marx badly stealing Iroquois, Anishinaabe, and Sioux philosophy and thinking. So, anyways, if it were so serious, someone would stop us. No, if Westerners attend to these issues at all, they do so in ways that are petty, tokenistic, comically ill-matched to the scale of their predicament. It is impossible to discern in their Western response to what they know the primacy of their survival instinct is. So, but anyways, but back to this point of this, right? The point I'm trying to make here is that capitalism is killing the planet. Anybody who investigates this at any, even the slight surface level of investigation that the West does, they don't really investigate anything. They sure as hell are not going to investigate too closely the United States illegal occupation of Hawaii, unless I shove it in their face at 700 decibels, which is why I do that all the time, all over social media and on this platform as well. Because otherwise I'm gonna be like, well, how can you accuse? Anyways, I'll get into that later. But if you accept, even from your own science experts, even Leo DiCaprio, I mean, why do you date people that are only 25 and under? But anyways, don't look up, right? I mean, even the people that are somewhat even remotely familiar with the reality on the ground. There are some people that are not familiar with any reality ever, and that's half of the West. It's just the conservative parties, Although actually, I want to say the conservatives are they're more familiar with some. There are more dialectical materialists. There are more actual Marxist thinkers, I would argue, in the West's conservative half, or their mask-off fascist half, because they know how to change society. They've done it already several times. But in terms of like climate science and the science, right? Then I would say the liberal West understands that a little bit more. How to make, that's the interesting thing, right? There's actually understanding how to move politics and how to move society and politics. The right understand that more. They don't understand anything about anything else. And how to move, but how some science works, like how to make medicines for biotech companies, how to program a Boeing manufactured military aircraft, right? How do the liberals understand how to? They understand climate change exists. They know the CO2 emissions increase when the greenhouse effect of the reflection of sunlight off of oceans bouncing off of clouds, like microwaving your biosphere. They understand that science. They don't understand anything about how to move in the real world. They don't understand the politics and the sociology that the fascists, that's the other half of the West, understands. So that, and then the rulers who understand some of each of that occupy your DCs, your Brussels, right? Your Wall Streets and your Greenwich, Connecticut's. Those people understand enough of both to manage their nightmare apocalypse show called The World Under Western Capitalist Hegemony, right? To prevent the spread of communism. But nobody is fucking sane enough in the West to try to actually get rid of understand all of history, politics, economics, globally, science, and social and political science, and dialectical materialism, and how to actually make changes in the world, and also has any the minimum of moral and ethical backbone to do anything fucking about it, for reasons of the way that they're socialized into a barbaric, I would call it child abuse. It's like to go to any Western school, public, private, charter, and to exist in Western culture is child abuse. It's like the U.S. would say, the atheist said that to be raised Christian, like Dawkins, that's child abuse, right? Because you're raising children to not believe in the science. The Christians will say, well, raising your children under liberals is their LGBTQ plus groomers have to be stopped from maltreating, hurting children by teaching them that there's more than two genders, right? And quote unquote turning girls into boys, and that's DeSantis' gang. But the reality is the entire West is a child abuse system that constructs future Westerners, right? Because everyone that comes out is differently incapable of because of the lack of material science understanding or social and political science understanding, and definitely all of historical understanding, and certainly philosophical, life affirming, actually survival, individual and collective. Because if you don't protect the collective, you don't protect the individual, right? Nobody has the value system and philosophical and lifeways and worldviews and paradigms that they need. When you're raised in the West, you definitely don't have that, and you sure as fuck. That's why when white people encounter indigenous people, they're like, oh my god, I feel like loved for the first time. I feel like connected with everything. You should not be encountering that for the first time when you have an ayahuasca ritual in between transferring from Harvard to Yale, when you went to South America and hung out with James Cameron, and then you LARPed Indian. The fact that white people and Westerners generally feel like they've had epiphanies when they speak to and listen to indigenous people. They have the feel sacred moment. That should not be, it's not really some magical mystical thing. You have been deprived systematically by your culture, your family, by your country, and your entire Western civilization by being falsely rooted in Aristotelian, Roman, British, French, and colonial, just murderous lifeways people, and then mass disinformation and lying. You should not be surprised when you encounter an indigenous person. It should not be some magical thing to meet a Maori or a Native Hawaiian, Anishinaabe, a Sioux, New Eastern philosophy. That's what all Star Wars is, basically magicification and mystification of Asians, and then having some green puppet go, fear you or not, and talk with a weird puppet fucking voice, right? That's what all of Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness is: mystification of indigenous Asian collectivist healed lifeways, and then making it and then making some shitty movie where a female Mexican character named America with a star-spangled shirt punches literal stars and stripes through the universe. I hate that fucking movie. I hate all the Marvel movies, but anyways, except Blade. Capitalism is killing the planet. My point before I went off on all of this is that if capitalism is killing the planet, okay, and even Western science has come to that conclusion, even if the half of your population that you purposely disinform and diseducate to maintain your fascist communist killers, they're called the conservatives in the West, even if they don't get it, the other half of a brain that you have, the adult half of the Western liberal brain that you have knows. Indigenous people have always known this, but you just figured this out. Congratulations, Westerners. Capitalism is killing the planet. Genius breakthrough that you've made. So if capitalism is killing the planet, and the United States denounces socialism, by extension, celebrating, glorifying, and saying we are irrevocably capitalist. That's why my point is that they're telling you what you need. Okay. Now when the stream finishes, you can go back to your progressive, liberal, or conservative, or fake left, patriot American socialism, or whatever bullshit. That's why I think like the patriot socialism was so interesting. It was an interesting little grift, right? Because it was kind of like, even the patriot socialists knew that what was going to happen was there's going to be an anti-communist war against China, but they're just like, oh, we'll make some money telling idiot, liberal, progressive, fake Western leftists that you can do socialism in America. But now the U.S. is saying the quiet part out loud. But part of that is because they're running out of time. They're already behind. Like I already said, they're already behind the global non-Western world. Africa, South America, Central America, the Pacific, and Asia are coming out. China is going to surpass the United States. They've already surpassed the United States. The U.S. is like plummeting faster and faster. Its military supremacy gone. Its fractional orbital reserve bombardment, hypersonic missiles can't shoot down a Chinese balloon even if they wanted to. They don't have any. The U.S. Its ships, all of its tanks have been destroyed by the Russians, including all of Europe's tanks. Not that it's going to use a lot of tanks, but it's military. It's literally begging Venezuela and Cuba to send guns and weaponry to Ukraine. It's laughable. Janet Yellen, the central bank, the weapon of mass financial destruction, U.S. dollar hegemony, petrodollar manager Janet Yellen is begging Africa personally to not go with China. This is a joke. The U.S. is gone already. So you should get over the idea that you have any hope in the United States. U.S. is not going to be in Hawaii much longer. The U.S. can't even keep its goddamn troops from not getting poisoned. Half of Hawaii is kind of ready to. A lot of Hawaii, even Hawaii still has like our own internal damage to undo. But they're not looking too strong. You can't even keep your Air Force, your Space Force
Even if it wanted to shoot down Chinese weather balloons, it can't stop dropping 700 gallons of diesel. I mean, what, people just like not taught like how to connect pipes or what? No, the U.S. You don't see the Chinese and Russians are not spilling jet fuel all over Cuba and Venezuela and all the places they work with. You notice that? It's the U.S. that can't keep its goddamn aircraft carriers from splattering oil all over the Pacific, and its F-35s are falling in the goddamn ocean. But that's because the U.S. and its capitalism is fundamentally incompetent, inefficient, and backward. And the self-centeredness internally causes people fighting over their money and lying to each other, which causes mass inefficiency. It's 800 military bases spending. It's like a toddler, badly playing a whack-a-mole, right? With like 10 million wolves popping out, right? China has one war they're gonna fight. It's called the next attempt to stop the spread of socialism and communism, which is what the U.S. wants to fight in Taiwan, Philippines, Japan with all their proxies. The Russians, they've been prepared. They have an economy that is organized around economics and real products and they're practicing and they have been fighting actual fights that the U.S. is constantly aggressing at them for. The U.S. just throws money into Afghanistan, throws money willy-nilly, sends Marines here, sends their own people there, sends them into Iraq with no Kevlar, broken Jeeps. They don't give a shit, right? People get killed. And every corporation, the Raytheon, the Lockheeds, they're all just taking their cut. The Wall Street, the Wall Street and the big techs have their own separate interests. That's why the U.S. is incoherent, right? It's like one day Biden comes out, it's like the U.S. one China policy is sturdy. There's one China, and the next day Nancy Pelosi is visiting Taiwan, going, there's two Chinas, right? Because everyone is selfishly, individualistically at an individual level, at a corporate level, at an industry level, the military-industrial complex, the big tech, Silicon Valley, Wall Street banking system, the pharmaceutical. They're each trying to rip everything apart while ripping the world apart. They get enough imperial solidarity to bomb a country badly and lose to Afghanistan farmers, and then they fucking turn around. And then they, sell the war to their people as, we tried. Oops, $21 trillion, half of it completely failed in its audit to be found. We spent $50,000 on a screw on the side of an F-16. But you see, so anyway, so the point, what was the point I was trying to make there? I'm just being very upset at these people because I'm spending a lot of time listening to it. But the point is that the people who manufacture apocalypses for everyone else, right? And certainly they have manufactured the apocalypse for the native people of Turtle Island, right? Those apocalypses are going to end, and that's the second point that I was going to come to. I'm not really talking about the zombie stuff too much, but this is more of Silver Spook uses the stealth thumbnail to not get taken down by the State Department, like Lee Camp, like Scott Ritter, like people who say the truth. But this is the Silver Spook mostly is just going to talk about other things. But anyways, I do recommend Blood Quantum though. If you like zombie movies, it's definitely very good. And but the others, so part of it is a kind of metaphor for settler colonial genocide historically, right? Indigenous people being invaded by these hordes of Wendigos, right? The Wendigo is the mouth that can never be full, right? It is a kind of manifestation of the selfish tendency. It's a mythological creature in many North Turtle Island cultures. Again, this is as far as I understand it. I myself am not Anishinaabe, but this is the stories that I've heard from many of my relatives, right? That I'm constantly talking to. And also you can read about it in Braiding Sweetgrass by Indigenous author Robin Wall Kimmerer. But the Wendigo is this force in nature, but it's also a character in the stories and legends, which all these things are wrapped together in a lot of indigenous cultures. The Wendigo is a beast that in the wintertime often comes, and it has a hunger in itself that it can never be satisfied. Right? It eats and it eats and it eats. It eats the meat, it eats the plants, it eats everything around it, but it is never full. And then it eats others. It's the cannibal. It eats the other people, right? The Wendigo, and it's not necessarily just, oh, be careful. I mean, obviously there were bears out there that eat people, and they kind of look like people. Sometimes when they stand up on two of their hind legs, but the Wendigo is a lesson. It is a multi-thousand year. The Hawaiians have their own myths, like the myth of the flying kalo against the greedy chief. The one chief who, the one alii, right? The one political leader who decided, or the political leader / business leader, right? It could be the business, the Hawaiian leader who decided to try to become a CEO and hoard wealth for himself, right? To alter the collectivist Hawaiian Aina based, in the sense that nobody owns any land, nobody owns any resources. The resources are collectively all of the people is produced by the mother that is the land for the use of all people. And so, and the li'i is at the closest, there is not really an English word that means what Hawaiian, our native culture practice, right? But the li'i was the leader, right, who is in charge, a steward is maybe the closest word, of best managing and helping to allocate the resources and resolve issues, right? They're kind of a political leader and a business leader. But you see, the fraudulence of the West is that business and, right, that was the United States' grift and fraud, right? That was its ingenious Western invention, was that we're gonna have political democracy and then we're gonna have business capitalism over there, as if they're separable. And then no, democracy cannot exist under capitalism, because then the capitalists create a plutocracy and they buy the government. So anyway, and they brainwash the masses. So, but Hawaii there was no differentiation. There was the political and the economic were not differentiated, and so the leaders in Hawaii who were involved in maintaining the balance, right? Because there's mountain and the ocean and the sea. There's a mountain, the upper Arctic. There's actually snow on Mauna Kea. There's 10 feet of snow. It takes a snowplow 2 trips to bulldoze the amount of snow that's up there right now, thanks to the Arctic River and the drooping jet stream caused by Western climate change. But anyways, the midland, the Arctic, and then you have the temperate zones, and then you have the mid-range of kind of like grasslands and different trees. And so in each area, from the mountains to the sea, different kind of, it's almost a different climate in a lot of ways. Different plants and life grow. The kalo, that is our staple food, our elder brother, the staple food of the kalo plant. It's like, it has a spinach-like leaf, and then it has a potato-like, highly nutritious. It has like 50% more. I'm sorry, sweet potato is one that has 50% more antioxidants than acai berries. But our staple food grows in a certain area. Medicinal plants grow in a higher area. The fish, which is a lot of the protein, is in the ocean area. And so the ali'i were in charge of allocating, right, and trying to make sure that people had the people at the higher areas had an appropriate amount of fish, and the people in the mid areas had the appropriate amounts of the medicine from the upper slopes and the different plants, right? And so that things are being distributed fairly, and that if there were conflicts, they were being resolved, right? And the luau is actually a place where the luau was like a town hall meeting / a G7 summit / the board meeting, right? In a economic, right, corporate. The Western way of organizing business is capitalism. So in a corporate sense, right, Mondragon is actually an indigenous region of Spain, right? It's actually a people that are not actually, they're not Romanized. The language is completely different. And that's why they have the world's large, Huawei is the biggest worker cooperative, and they're the second largest, is Mondragon. That's actually an indigenous region of Europe out. It's a non-Greco-Roman Europeanized region of Spain called the Basque region. And so in Hawaii, it was similar, where you have like people would come together, they would decide, okay, let us build additional, we'll take some of our people from the mountainous region, we're going to build a new fish pond because we need more. This looks like the weather systems are changing. We need to reallocate some resources here in the midlands. We've got to move them, right? So the political economic decisions were made collectively at the luau, where all of the resources were distributed equally. There was nobody. If you had 10,000 fish or you had 2 fish, you brought the 2 fish or the 10,000 fish. If you farmed 1,000 taro or you brought 2 taro, there was no market where somebody is like, okay, well, you have 10,000 taro, it's $3 per. Okay, who's gonna buy taro at $5, $6, $6 a pound, 7, right? There was no inflation. There's no, it just, you brought it in. There was no track of how much the land that you owned, what you brought, and then how much you brought, you got an X amount of dollars, and then you accumulated that dollars. No, there's none of that, right? You brought, everything you have was cooked in a Olympic swimming pool sized giant underground oven, depending on the size of the community of the ahupua'a. And then after it was cooked, everything was distributed. The eldest, the most able-bodied would feed the eldest, the kupuna, and the keiki, the children, and the sick and the infirm. So literally, every day, really, but and certainly every luau, actual existing socialism and communism was reaffirmed through the culinary practices, through the political and economic practices which were fused together, right? The able-bodied, right? Mutual aid, right? What are all these the Marxist theories they stole from indigenous people, right? We have to take from the from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. All these theories that literally was what was lived out for thousands of years at a 1 million person scale. There's 1 million people in Hawaii at one point, and not just in Hawaii. It's all over the world actually. And so the Wendigo. But coming back to the Wendigo, like I'm telling you another native. I'm a native Hawaiian, so I'm telling you a native Hawaiian story, but. The Wendigo, right? And so let me finish that story real quick. So the myth of the flying kalo is the myth where the 2 kalo plants, right, who leave, and it was a lesson for Hawaiians who had a system of actual democracy where if you had number one, you don't have just one vote every 4 years. This is nonsensical. This is ridiculous. You have one vote every 4 years, and you have existent capitalism that can buy the so-called elected representatives, right? There has never been actual democracy in Greece, Rome, medieval Europe, colonial Europe, Britain, France, Spain, the United States, Japan, and any Western democracy loses whatever actual democracy it had. The word democracy is a joke. English and French and Spanish and all the Romance languages, all the Roman languages, which is all the Greek languages, are all nonsense fucking languages. There has never been actual democracy anywhere in the Western world, including the United States, Canada. I gotta say that as much as possible, because this is part of how they make you go and kill millions of people, innocent people in wars, is because they tell you that one's not a democracy. Get your ass on that boat and go to that authoritarian regime and kill them. Right? They're doing that right now. Americans have died. They got their asses killed in a war in Europe because they believed bullshit about who is democratic and who isn't. Russia is more democratic than the United States. This is another interesting point. You should. I'm just gonna say that, and then you can go investigate that yourself. Don't investigate it in the Western media. Ask Danny Haifong and ask ask Danny Haifong, Black Agenda Report. Ask somebody with an actual education. Ask the Cubans. Ask the Cubans. The Wendigo is the Lee who would hoard, right? Who would not give away. People could move away from the leader. They could move to another ahupua'a, another region. They could call other ali in to do a restorative justice. Ho'oponopono is not just saying I'm sorry, right? That's the joke of Western justice, right? And Western reconciliation, right? This reconciliation is a Holy Roman imperial bribe scheme and a pedophilia ring. That's what reconciliation is. You go in there and it's like a CIA secret collection for the Catholic Church, which is just it's a multi-thousand year Italian empire, Roman Italian empire that continues to this very day. It is integrated into the Western coalition run by the United States under Christianity. That is another justification for massacres, including indigenous people. To this very day, by the way, I should argue, because Christianity wipes out half of the Hawaiians who are most colonized internally are the ones that go to the church the most, sadly. The ones who didn't get a vaccine and they go, the Republican Hawaiians, they're the most Christian. Samoan, deeply Christian. So the Holy Roman the Holy Roman Empire, right? That I forgot where I came. I keep dovetailing off. I'm too upset looking at the news yesterday, I think. But the elite who would refuse to give away wealth, they chose to not. They could be brought into question. They would say, why are you the one elite? Just another way I like to put it is the one socialist leader, communist leader, who decided to hoard like a Bill Gates. If you wanted to try to be a CEO, right? Nobody was CEOs, right? The whole entire society was healed. Very important to remember. This is why it's very difficult in the United States or Europe or Canada to make any changes, right? You want to make these paper Band-Aid changes. You want to put Band-Aids on your stage 4 metastasized melanoma cancer. That's what it is when you want to go, let's just have social democracy. You don't need a Band-Aid. You don't put a duct tape. You can't duct tape, your legs falling off. You're trying to put duct tape on. You have to have like serious chemotherapy. You have to like deep cleaning, deep cleansing. I can't say some of the things that the U.S. needs. I might be TOS violation, but you know what it is. You should. I hope you do by now. I hope after you see that, you should know the United States is never gonna not be capitalist. I've been saying this for how many years, right? And the people are just like, the indigenous and black people of color, like, yep. And then the white people are just like, what? That makes me feel sad, because I identify strongly as an American and a white person. Anyway, constructed identity, constructed fraudulent country. The elite who did not, right? The elite who did not redistribute the wealth and try to be a hoarder would be reprimanded and would be given. You would lose people, which would mean you would lose mana. Mana is not just a word that means the magic that allows you to cast Lightning 5 and Fireball 2 and Meteor Spell in D&D and all this other cultural appropriation of Hawaiian culture that they stick into all of your tabletop RPG games for fantasy nerds. Mana actually meant the political and social power that comes from and flows from the people. That's actually what that means. You lose people, and that would lose you mana because it was shown that you did not care for the people, right? Mana is actual votes in an actual democracy that has never existed in any Western country, right? Mana is the power that flows from the people who give you the makainana, the people of the land, the eyes and the face of the land that is your mother, the environment. That's the Hawaiian understand. Again, that's the Hawaiian cosmology and the Hawaiian worldview, right? The power that flows from the land, it's not just metaphorically, oh, the land is so powerful and you hug the tree and you hug the ground and you just love the land. No, the land feeds you. The people of the land work the land. In a Marxist, anarchist, communist, socialist, Western left analysis, the land and the power of the people that work the land, but it goes beyond just the workers. It's the land itself that produces the trees and the plants and the people that work the land, right? The eyes and the face of the land, right? The Li is not the Li, unlike the West, where the king is the greatest divine descendant of God, right? The capitalist is the wealth worshipped, Fortune 500 job creator doing God's work. Lloyd Blankfein, CEO of Goldman Sachs, just beautifully says the quiet part out loud. I love it when the West is very honest about who they are, and America is honest about who they are. The idea that the people who have the most money and the power who are running things are great because they have hoarded the wealth, or they have some disembodied space kingmaker that made you king, right? And that lets you do whatever you want for reasons that an entire class of professional think tankers, also known as the clergy, would justify under Holy Roman and then Holy Anglican colonial capitalism. This is unknown, right? So in Hawaii, the power that flows from the people, from the land through the people to the Li, can be taken back by the people. And so when you would leave just as an example, serfs were owned by the lord, the property under Euro feudalism, And people under capitalism were owned by their employer. Ultimately, you are under a tyranny, under an employer. Under Euro feudalism, you could not like just up and leave. The power of the Lord does not flow from the people. The power of the Lord and the King flows from the King down. It flows from God to the King, and then the military and political alliances between the king and the lords and the sub vassals. It's like the Lord has access to your body, can kill you at any time he feels like it. There's no laws, there's no justice for the commoners, right? The privilege is the word that means private law. It's a private law. There's the commoners are the masses. They're the unwashed. Who cares? Who cares? You know, Game of Thrones is like, you can watch Game of Thrones because Game of Thrones is like Europe, very sanitized. It's like a puff piece of Europe. Europe was worse than that, and it is worse than that. In Hawaii, the power of the people. The people give the Ali'i their mana. The Ali'i don't have anything without the people. The Ali'i have a temporary position as a leader if they have proven themselves to be able to have capabilities in managing. Right? This is also forgotten by some Hawaiians because of Western brainwashing and colonization. But anyway, my point there is that if a Ali'i was to take any amount of wealth, the revenue from the kalo, take fish, hoard it to themselves, try to accumulate power into themselves, the other 99 Ali'i on the island of the Big Island, just as one example, Moku Okeawe, would come and say, why are you hoarding? Why are you becoming a capitalist? Why are you centering the wealth and the power onto yourself? Why are you taking for yourself when the people go hungry? Europe is constantly having its commoners die in famines, having shit poured on them, right? This dying of plagues. That's a whole saying, right? When in the bad times, the poor babies cry out in hunger, and the rich people's cat and the wealthy cats are filled with the milk, right? The rich cats survive, and all the poor babies die. That's Europe forever, right? And it's even worse if you're not a white European. The Greeks had the Hellenic peoples had Afro-Asiatic slaves. You know, they didn't have the white. They didn't specifically say white, but it was the non-Westerners were their slaves. And those people, if there was a bad time, they would die first and they would starve. And this was right and just for the Greeks, who the United States based their entire political system on. So, my point is that when you have the Wendigo, right? So the Ali'i who was out of Pono, which is justice and righteousness and justice, which is like what is the governs this. That is actual justice. You can't have justice if you don't have collectivism, socialism. You can't have democracy, and you can't have justice. You can't have any of those things. Justice, to have justice, it requires people collectively being in a just economic, right? Nobody has undue amounts of wealth. Nobody is being harmed economically through poverty, homelessness. There's no such thing in Hawaii prior to colonization. No poverty, no homelessness. People lived 80 to 100 years. So to have justice or democracy requires that people, you have to already have collectivism, socialism, to have the attempt at justice. Doesn't mean you have justice or that you have, it's not perfect, but the society has to have people in healed social relationships, healed economic relationships, right? Nobody with more than the other. No one group of culture of people killing the other, right? So the right making is in times of scarcity, bad things can happen. They did it. Sometimes happen. Sometimes people fought. After the time of scarcity went away, then the whole Pono time of healing had to be engaged in. So you have to say, I'm sorry that we killed you. When the food ran out and there was only enough to feed 50 people and we had 100 people, we're sorry that these things happen. And then that has to not just, it's about reestablishing the collective socialist, non-ethnic strife-filled society to right the bad blood between peoples, between parts, because these are things that human beings can encounter. Like indigenous people in Turtle Island, sometimes you had bad encounters with a different tribe, but then you have to fix You have to heal those relationships between your relatives, right? From person to person, but also from, between, Anishinaabe or Stolo. I'm not saying that those people had a fight, or with the people of Maui versus the people of Big Island, right? But you can't begin right making if your entire society is based upon a minority of people having all the power and the money and everyone else being brainwashed and suffering under them. That is the Western way. There has never been anything but that for the duration, for thousands of years. Under Greco-Roman capitalism, slavery, feudal Europe, capitalist colonial Europe, so-called social democracy Europe that doesn't have any of those things, because look at the actual statistics of the people that are of how people are in prison, how many wars they're still involved in. The United States, there's never ever been justice, because there can't be justice as long as you have a selfish individualism and capitalist based and ethnic tension fomenting, I would argue. Ethnic strife fomenting, fascism promoting culture like the Western culture is. Right? Colonialism is just fascism applied to all of the global South, the majority of Earth. And then when they apply it internally, it's called. They only call it fascism when it's somebody that they don't like, that they've been supporting the whole time, like Hitler. When the Anglo-Saxons and the Franks suddenly go, oh, I don't know if we like this Hitler that much, then they call it fascism, and they pretend like they fought him. No, it was the Soviet Union and the Chinese that fought fascists for the last century. Anyway, so long story short, the Wendigo is the embodiment of that which eats and takes, like the one greedy chief. Wendigo is the personification of capitalism. It is the personification of non-indigenous. I want to put words in their mouth, but as I understand, the Wendigo is the personification of non-Turtle Island, Native American, right, non-indigenous lifeways and culture and thinking and mindset as a story. So that none of the indigenous people of their tribe, of their community, of their nation fall into that. And like in Hawaii, the Wendigo comes out in a time of scarcity during the bad winter storm when it's cold, we don't have enough food, right? And then the Wendigo comes out because it's in the Wendigo is a possibility in the heart, in the psyche of every human, of every person, right? That's part of the point. And then it can come out, and then we have to try to stop it from coming out. We have to stay collective, stay socialist, stay collectivist, stay cooperative. Don't become a Western, The Last of Us, individual man with a gun, Clint Eastwood survivor, right? Don't eat your neighbor. That's Alex. I quoteth Alex Jones. When times get tough, I'm going to eat my neighbor. I'm going to get my MREs. I'm going to get my guns. I'm going to get my Smith & Wessons. I'm going to go into my bunker, just like John Goodman in the Cloverfield movie. I'm going to eat my neighbor. I'm going to have a barrel full of all my neighbors. So the U.S. is literally saying they're all going to be, we're all going to just become, we're literally going to Wendigo fight where we become cannibals and eat each other. So this is actually it's this weird thing, right? And so psychologically, right, if you know that that's who you are because you're an American and you're like, yeah, I'm going to eat my neighbor. My neighbor going to try to eat me. I'm going to eat him first. I'm going to eat my neighbor because, I've been scamming my neighbor this whole goddamn time. Everyone, America is a pyramid scheme of everyone, 330 million individual pyramid schemes trying to out pyramid scheme each other and rip each other off and eat each other. It's a dog eat dog. That's not fair to dogs. The West is a Westerner eat Westerner. The West is a white eat white world, and especially black and brown people if they can. But so the Wendigo though is a personification of selfish individual lifeways that are alien. They're not inherent. They are not indigenous to the people of Turtle Island that have existed there for thousands and tens of thousands and possibly hundreds of thousands of years. They are not native to Hawaii. Right, they are not native to a lot of the earth, right? In different ways and in forms, and so they were not native to Africa either. They actually were imported into Africa, thousands of years ago. For tens of thousands of years, there was no slavery. People didn't identify. There's a book, "Being Human Being," that's from an African perspective. They're saying two African professors researched this, and they said you look back through the deep 70,000 year history of human existence, Homo sapiens in Africa, There was no slavery. There was no identification of better people being better or superior or inferior based on arbitrary racial immutable characteristics like skin color, nose width, hair texture, right? There were differences, but were not divided based on that. Similar for Hawaii, there was no such thing as racism of peoples of the world judged as inferior based on just like things like whether they had more melanin or not. Those were imported. Later in the game, predominantly from that region of the northern Mediterranean parts of Europe, that region in the a little bit east of Greece and a little bit north of Italy. That in that region, and that's not to say that the water and the food there, the soil is messed up and it makes you into a terrible person in that region. No, it's just like the Wendigo tendencies, selfish individualism, wealth hoarding, mass violation, mass violence, and mass disinformation evolved and built and grew, right? It wasn't like the cancer was never nipped in the bud there, and so for thousands of years it grew and it swelled into greater and greater empires. The Greeks and then the Romans grew, and eventually you have the colonial era. It's just a manifestation of the massive mega tumor of the British, French, Dutch, etc., going around the world and pulling everything into the giant cyst that is London, Paris, New York, etc. That's another way to look at it. New York, London, Paris, and then Tokyo, when they get hit and they join the imperial ways, they are just they are the world centers of planetary civilizational cancer. And if you become a satellite, a vassal, a province, right? A vassal state like all of the EU, all of their countries, like Japan, you become, you become complicit and you become a cell of that cancerous, metastasized lesion. You become a legion of the legions. You are a part of the apocalypse. And then you write stories to yourself about how, what if computers become self-aware and they make an apocalypse, right? And that's called cyberpunk. What if a virus gets made, probably in China, because all we do is Western propaganda, and then we have an apocalypse, right? What if, right? No, you are the apocalypse. You're the zombie apocalypse. You're the Wendigo. You're the cannibal. You're the selfish individual. You confirm it. You confirm it every time you do this. We are a capitalist country. You know what they actually said? It was interesting. If you look through the bill, right? The U.S. is saying we are the zombies, right? They say Marx, 40%. I think one of the congressmen was like 40%. I appreciate them for saying it out loud. 40% of Gen Z think that Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto is a better document for freedom and democracy, and then Thomas Jefferson's Constitution. Number one, Thomas stole the Constitution from indigenous people and badly copied it and never followed it. But, right? It's like, Karl Marx got his ideas from indigenous peoples, right? And then applied them to the capitalism of that was growing in places like London and swelling. Karl Marx was going like, holy shit, I'm a piece of this cancer cell. God damn, I better start exercising this. I better start excising this before we all get eaten alive by these high street former lords that are now owning 90% to 95% of all of the wealth of the British Empire. So, you know what I'm saying? So, so Blood Quantum is not just a story, so there's many levels to this, as that's ultimately what I'm trying to point out, right? The Blood Quantum, on one level, it's a story of surviving the last 500 years of surviving the last 500 years of being a native person under the onslaught, right? Under the zombie invasion of cannibalistic flesh eaters. that are the colonizers coming in, wiping you out, right? Taking your women and children, burning your villages, setting everything on fire, destroying your old growth forests, right? And then it's also a story of directly in this moment, the 2020 pandemic, right? Where a virus gets out and it disproportionately infects and kills colonizer areas and indigenous people because they have pre-existing lifeways that defend collective health, right? And care about collective health rather than individual pursuits. You can't stop pandemic if you individually want to go to your yoga class and have your fun at your party. It's 2020 and there's no vaccine, and you want to go to your church, right? If you're conservative, if you're liberal or progressive, then you go to your, Sting concert or your convention with no mask because it's inconvenient. It's not fun for you, right? So the selfish, individualistic Western Wendigo way also causes, 1,000 times more people getting killed and flooding the ERs and hospital rooms, causing the destruction of the entire healthcare system, right? Mass million nurses and doctors quitting, right? And so the COVID-19, biohazard, Resident Evil, not full like zombification of everybody, but mass temporary zombification or long-term through long COVID and brain fog and brain damage, the exploding Kawasaki heart syndrome that people had at the beginning, the long-term blood clotting and inability to climb stairs, the sluggish shambling of people who used to run, marathons, in 2 hours, who now they can barely, walk from their bed to the fridge without being winded, right? This and zombification, and then mass death in not Europe, U.S., Canada, all over. You see it plainly. Whatever they say about the pandemic was a great, it was a great Western BS blanket, wool remover. To pull the wool from my eyes, right? There's a lot of wool all over the eyes of the West, but that was a big one. Like, look at who was. It's all the white Western countries. Another one, you want to get your wool pulled over your eyes. Look at the countries that voted for Nazism or abstain, which says we're both okay. We're not necessarily against Nazism, but we're okay with Nazism happening. That's all the Western countries, right? And also look for the countries that on everything, right? Who wants to not give the vaccines around the world? Who wants to, all those things? Those places have been hit. And so Blood Quantum, where only indigenous people are not getting infected by the virus, has a particular resonance there. And then on another level, right, as I said, living under settler colonial, in the present, we're still living under settler colonial genocide. But there's also, if a zombie, if a virus that causes people to turn into zombies were to occur, it's also like there's a book called Trail of Lightning. Is it Trail of Lightning? Trail of Lightning. I think that's what it is. Trail of Lightning is Rebecca Roanhorse is it is another apocalyptic indigenous created book. While most of the world is drowned beneath sudden rising waters or climate apocalypse, so it's more climate and environmental apocalypse. The Dineta, formerly Navajo Reservation, has been reborn. The gods and heroes of legend walk the land, but so do monsters. Maggie Hosky, a Dineta monster hunter, supernaturally gifted killer. When a small town needs help finding a missing girl, Maggie is their last and best hope. But what Maggie uncovers about the monster is much larger and more terrifying than anything she could imagine. So anyways, this is a story, it's similar to Blood Quantum, but instead of a zombie apocalypse, it's environmental, and it's by Rebecca Roanhorse, is a Diné writer and author. And quick sidebar, quick 25th, well, I should say 50th diversion in the Silver Spook endless stream of tangents. If your partner, or especially your husband, is telling you and policing the way that you identify your work, I thought it was a big thread the other day or yesterday, don't that person is the a-hole, and you should think about leaving that person. So just for all the authors, especially the women authors, being told by their husbands they can't be called authors. Holly is an author, and if Holly wants to identify as an author, Holly identifies as an author. And I'll say Holly is an author. Holly writes books. At the end of every stream, you know, I always say that at the end, or I try to remember to say that. If Holly said, "Don't call me an author," then I won't call Holly when I say that. How hard is that, right? No, the other guy, the Mr. Pilot Boy, is like, that could actually be a problem. If you say you're a pilot, but and you don't know how to fly a plane, that could actually be like if Holly said, "Call me president of Hawaii," I'm like, wait, that's Holly wouldn't say that because that's nonsense, right? But if you say something like that's actually there's a real problem there. But it's like if you write books and you want to be called an author, it doesn't matter if you've sold one book or 2,000 or 10 million books. J.K. Rowling shouldn't be called an author. J.K. Rowling should be called a turf, freaking racist, terrible person. J.K. Rowling makes 1 million persons' livings by selling ridiculous amounts of books. But J.K. Rowling doesn't deserve to be called an author, I'd argue. J.K. Rowling is a plagiarist of The Good Witch. So, there's that. But anyway. But that's a little divergent. So, but I bring it up because it's a story of indigenous people surviving an apocalypse, by they have to build walls around because white people are trying to get into the reservation. I was actually talking to indigenous relatives this week, this past week, less than a week ago. I had a video. The latest Silver Spook non-stream video content is an indigenous game devs discussion with my fellow Pawnee, Cherokee, Anishinaabe, Métis, Nehia, and of course I'm Native Hawaiian. And in our indigenous game devs discussion, we were talking about what was I saying? Yeah, we're in our indigenous game devs discussion. We were talking about at one point. I don't think it's actually in this panel. You can watch this panel if you want to learn more about what it's like to be an indigenous person and making video games at the same time. And it's a lot of in-house talk. So as well, and just weird nerding out about nostalgia from an indigenous perspective. Talking about John Romero, because John Romero is an indigenous person that created the one of the lead creators of the Doom video games and franchise. But anyways, I'm off my topic. So the indigenous people, though, in like Washington, Oregon, they're concerned because there are a lot of people that are settlers are talking about withdrawing from places like Seattle and Portland, building Columbia, literally Columbia. It's going to be a new settlement, a new America, Columbia in Washington or Oregon, but it's going to be on or near or just right there on indigenous territory. And so the indigenous people they're getting ready to like do what's happening inside of Trail. They're saying, we're going to blockade. They've already done this too during the pandemic. We're going to blockade the roads. We're going to control the bridges. One thing you might not realize, the indigenous people are 2 to 3 times sometimes indigenous people are twice or more overrepresented in the U.S. military. Not because they particularly want to, but because of the history of colonization means you try to force disproportionately the black and brown peoples into the empire to do the fighting for you. So that's why Finn in Star Wars is so important as a character. That's why they got rid of him, because he was saying the quiet part too loudly, right? Finn in Star Wars episode 7, 8, 9 is more realistic. Most of the Stormtrooper, not because, and as I say, it's because poverty and economic lack is disproportionately impacting the indigenous peoples. Anyway, so long story short, indigenous people have military training, and same goes for Native Hawaiians. I don't recommend the Hawaiians go into the military because you're going to be doing genocide and imperial colonization of other people the way that the U.S. did it to you. So, but either way, my point is that in Blood Quantum, that comes up as well. Because indigenous people were overrepresented in the military, they're also prepared. So what I'm saying is the real world United States and Canada, where you have indigenous people looking at the settlers who are going, well, we're all going to flood into this area to get away from our American tyrants. The liberals are enacting tyranny by making us wear masks and they're Justin Trudeau he's gonna make China he's a CCP clone, and so we, the great Canadians, are gonna build new Canada, the new Canadian Republic over here in an indigenous, the Mi'kmaq territory. I mean, literally, what's happening in Blood Quantum? There's people in Canada and the United States that have tried to, right, and are thinking about doing this as the U.S. and Canada fall apart. And they're saying like, yeah, we're not letting these people do that shit. And so what happens so the Trail of Lightning, real world Washington. There's one specific place where I've heard this. There's attempts at this, and then also in the Blood Quantum movie, a place where you have, people, who are running. I mean, white people trying to flood into indigenous territories, right, and them having to defend themselves. Is it's a reality. I wish it wasn't. I wish it wasn't. But it is a reality. And so, so in Blood Quantum, right, you have not all the indigenous people agree. That's very important. Indigenous people, no people are a monolith, and indigenous people are not monoliths, right? We're not just there singing to the whales, right? Riding the whales, singing to the trees, right? Being your cute little blue space metaphor for colonialism that James Cameron likes to steal, right? We're not your Avatar waterbenders that you, in your anti-blackness and colorism, and whiten and sever from the indigenous cultures made by two white dudes like Avatar was. Indigenous people don't all agree about what is happening, what to do, right? Indigenous people, we have to go through our own, working through our own trauma that you have inflicted upon us, the United States, you American, you and your ancestors, whether you like it or not, have inflicted upon us. We have to go through that. And we have to go through your collapsing United States, and your collapsing Canada, and your collapsing capitalist system that, as I have tried to, I feel like I have successfully made that point, so I'm not going to make it again. We have to survive your collapsing capitalism, which we did not have, which we did not invent, which we did not practice, which you tried to force upon us, which you literally tried to eradicate us for practicing the opposite of capitalism, communism. The Department of Indian Affairs explicitly stated the indigenous, the Native American are not. They have collectivist, communistic practices. These are not. These cannot coexist with civilized capitalism. Civilization is equated with capitalism, so the American and Western way is capitalism, right? So we have never practiced those. We have never wanted those. It's becoming clearer every day that it is us that have been the actual solution this entire time, right? And so, and every time and as I said, every time you do this, you just make it clearer and clearer, right? So, and so finally, so what happens now in the real world and in the future is actually very much, kind of shown in this movie. Some of the indigenous people are saying, well, we can't get the zombie. We're not zombified. We're not susceptible to that virus that causes us to be Wendigos because we're not Wendigo people, right? However, we can still be killed. We can still be killed by the white zombies, right? So even if you can't get infected with the brain destroying virus that causes you to want to eat everything around you, right? But at the same time, if a zombie shows up, it can bite you and eat you till you're dead. So you're not invulnerable, right? So that's another important point. And so some of the indigenous people in Blood Quantum, like the guy in the center, he's like, we gotta just get rid of all the white people. We gotta kill all the white people here, and we just gotta get them all out. We can't have any white people inside of our area, because and he has a legitimate, in that sense, he has a legitimate there's a legitimate concern, because if one of the settlers gets bitten, they can quickly bite all the other ones, and all of a sudden you have a whole, at one point they have like 4-1. There's like 50 of them, and there's like 200 or so white people inside, because other indigenous people are saying we should, the settler colonizers, they're innocent people too. I mean, because they technically, it's not like indigenous people just want all the white people to just die, because that would not be an indigenous practice. You part of our way is to care for all people, even the people that have harmed us. As it's very difficult. I tell you, you make it very hard sometimes. White people make it very hard, but still, the indigenous people, despite the threat to their own life, despite the racism of the white people that are coming to their land, the indigenous, the collective, right, is still caring for four times as many white people inside of their Mi'kmaq Red Crow reservation, right, than there are indigenous people. That's actually a very good metaphor, though, for the United States. Despite the constant threat of our death, our poisoning of our water, racist policing throwing us and our teenagers and adults in prison, starlight rides, despite your military invasion, despite your banning our languages, punishing us for speaking our languages, to this day, to this second, right? Despite your continued genocidal attempts to wipe us out, we still take care of you. We carry on the fight. 25%, right, of climate change, 25% of all of the climate. Just one example of this, 25% of annual U.S. and Canadian emissions by Western scientists' measurement has been stopped. Of the greatest emitters in the world, the U.S. is number one, right? And Canada's right up there. Indigenous resistance has stopped or delayed greenhouse gas pollution equivalent to at least 25% of total U.S. and Canadian emissions by Western environmental scientists' investigations into that topic. A very deep, wide study, right? Taking all variables into account. So even as you kill us, we still fight. That's why I have this album, Warriors of the Land, right? We still try to help. We're not fighting just for us. When I try as my best to decry the U.S. illegal occupation that's poisoning our water, that's building its bases here illegally on Hawaii, that's bombing all of our that's not just for me. That's not just for even the Asians that the U.S. is going to kill with their B-52s and their Indo-Pacific Command. That's for all the people of all the white and non-white people in Hawaii. That's for all the people in the United States who will be harmed by the poisoning of this entire ocean and any war that breaks out. Right? It doesn't help my material interest. What the U.S., if you know what would help my material interest, if I just pretended to be white and just sat down and be a good little American and don't be Hawaiian anymore. But that is not the indigenous, to actually be a native Hawaiian who cares about all people, not just my material condition right now. Again, that's a limited Western left of I would actually even the Marx himself. That's a limited analysis. To be an indigenous person is, I would say, it's just, one day it won't be called indigenous. It'll just be called to be a human. To be the normal, healed, non-damaged, broken form of a human is to care about all people and all of the environment and your land and understand its interconnected relationships. Understand all of your human history and then work for all of the people in your own local positionality, in your own place, but also thinking of it globally. That is what it is to be a native indigenous person. It doesn't matter, despite how much one group, right, has hurt you. Despite how much the United States has hurt me, I don't go, screw the United Americans. I don't care. I'm just going to make money here. I'm going to, You know, that is to go full Western. That is to go full broken. That's full Wendigo. You know, as I always say, I'm always going to be half Stormtrooper because I was raised under the U.S. genocidal, anti-Hawaiian, forced Americanization system of child abuse called Western school. My parents were genocided. My parents don't believe they're Hawaiians. They believe they're Christian, white, but they're a little too dark on their skin color. My mom's hair texture is too curly, but she believes my mom and dad, they identify as basically white people, but a little too burnt. And so I choose not to be part of the project that my parents have chosen to be a part of. Or, I don't know, they're too scared, you know. It was they're boomers, whatever it is, doesn't matter. To be an indigenous person, and that goes for all indigenous people, by the way. We have to make these choices, just like these characters. Are you going to choose to honor your ancestors and your relatives that fought for all people, for the earth, for what is actually Pono? There's no word for justice in English or any Western language. Are you going to fight for what is actually Pono, which equates approximately to what the West thinks of as justice? Or are you going to fight for all people? Or are you going to be a selfish? Are you going to think of yourself, your family now, and let the cancer fester for another generation? Are you going to think about the 7 generations before and the 7 generations after you? Or are you going to think about your time, your fiscal quarter, your house, your little Last of Us plot with your American flag and your land and your food, and that's it? Or maybe just you and people that are also queer, maybe just the white queer community, and never mind the black one. Or just you, maybe your black neighborhood, and be like Kamala Harris, and then just your little suburb in DC. But if you limit yourself to any one of these small subgroupings, that is also failure to honor the 70,000 years of human, unbroken, uncancerified, human untraumatized heritage. You know what I'm saying? When you root yourself in Western culture, when you root yourself in Greece, Rome, the so-called Enlightenment, the so-called Renaissance, the so-called great heritages of Britain, France, and Spain, and the United States, you root yourself in cancer. You root yourself in evil. You root yourself in the dark blood. You root yourself in broken ancestors, and you build a broken reality. That's my parents. They root themselves. I don't think they didn't really choose. They were just out of fear and terror of being classified as terrorists, of going to prison, of never having gainful employment, like the crazy Hawaiians in their sovereignty. Right? My dad talks about those crazy Hawaiians. Right? That's what he says. Oh, that crazy anti-Haunani. You know, the Asian side. Oh, I don't want to go to the internment camp. Legitimate terror of going to an internment camp. I got Asian relatives in Hawaii. They're like, but their solution was just work for the tourism industry, be hush hush, be a good settler American, right? Like Danny Noy, and commit war crimes with the U.S. military and make $600,000 a year. But if you choose to turn your back on your human heritage and side with the Wendigo, to side with the unhealed descendants of Greco-Roman trauma and the broken way, then you are part of the apocalypse. You're part of the continued cancer. You're not just part of. This is the problem with the people who when you just talk about capitalism, identity politics. This comes up everywhere in the West because it's not if you only talk about, oh my God, I don't have enough money right now, and there's this problem with the capitalism. Yeah, it's a problem, but you have to you can't just stop at. The problem is, yes, it's a problem, but you have to go deeper to where does that come from. What are the psychological, social, and historical and civilizational realities and identities that are manufactured, produced, enforced, right, through the grand chessboard players that run the current iteration of New Rome and New Greece? It's called DC, and it's called it's called the Davos Group, right? You can't just be like, I want my health. Once I get my health care, I'm going to stop being radical anymore. No, you have to fight for everybody. You know, that's the problem. That's the problem with the European Social Democracy Project is one day I hope that every European will be there to put their life on the line for their African relatives, but that's not where they are. One day I hope the Germans will be there to really be there for their Russian relatives, but that's not where most of them are, unfortunately. One day I hope the United States and the people of America will be there for their not just I like Jackie Chan. One day I hope the people of the United States will be there for their indigenous relatives. The Americans will put their life on their line for the Native Americans, and they will put their life on the line for the Chinese, and they will care about the Chinese people who are actually not some imaginary, I'm gonna end Xi Jinping's evilness. One day I hope the Americans know who their Asian relatives are. They don't know anything about them right now, and they definitely don't care about them. Every party of the United States is just left, right, and center is hand over fist trying to throw darts at the Chinese fucking balloon right now. The only people that care about Asian indigenous relatives is the BIPOC world, really, if you look closely. I see like maybe 3 in my Twitter feeds. I'm like, I shouldn't say there's 0, but the ones who care about all people of the world, not just their little suburb, city, town, subclass of France, Germany, my little part of California, or my little family. The only people that are there for everyone in the world, right, are the ones that have disaffiliated. They don't denounce socialism. They have denounced the United States. They have denounced the European Union. They have denounced all of that, and they acknowledge the struggle that indigenous people of this earth have been fighting for thousands of years. But the people who call themselves left or whatever this thing is in most of the Western world, they're not there. I don't wish that. I have to tell you the truth. But my point when I'm getting off of is that is what it is to be indigenous, is to have, as a metaphor in the show, is they're taking care of the white population. They're taking care of the people that have hurt them and broke them, but still remain resilient in the face of annihilation. Indigenous people, in the face of police raiding their towns, missing and murdering indigenous women, being used as a nuclear test site, being used as being killed in hospitals on camera, like in Quebec when those nurses literally injected morphine into an indigenous woman, calling her a filthy little roach, multiplying her bugs and shit. Nurses in Quebec killed an indigenous woman on camera in a hospital by knowingly injecting morphine, which is said on her medical sheet she was allergic to. They killed her on camera. And Canada said nothing. Canada was silent. Canada buried it. So, to be indigenous is to see that, watch that, get upset, feel mad, and then keep fighting for even white people. Even still. So, so that's part of, and so in the movie, when come back, when they're taking care of those people, they don't, a lot of the people are very upset. They're like, why do we have to care? Why do we have to care? Actually, I should say there's maybe like one or two of the native people are like very, very, very upset. And the ones who are the most upset, Gary Farmer is one of them, and then the boy in the middle, right? But they're the ones who didn't have solid indigenous upbringings. They're like the orphan boys, They're like the ones that have been most damaged. And so they're the ones that ultimately say, no, we just, it's every person, every tribe for themselves. And then there's an internal fight between the kind of indigenous people who have lost their way. Even the boy, the character in the center here, he even says at one point, yeah, I know I'm an asshole. I didn't have my parents were non-present or terrible, which is, sadly, that's a thing. I'm not saying that people that have no indigenous people who have their parents stolen or who were not raised by indigenous parents because of the genocidal social work system that takes native people and places them with white families to eradicate indigeneity and lifeways and culture, which is that happens to Hawaiians. We're the number one most overrepresented in the foster system because the U.S. is trying to eradicate us and our communist, collectivist, indigenous lifeways. And that doesn't mean that just because you were raised by white parents as a native person, stolen from your stolen from your native mother people and given to a white abusive family, etc. That doesn't mean that you can't return and you can't try to get back in touch with your roots, who you are, and with the rest of, as I said, with the rest of your human heritage, your healed human heritage, right? But it does mean that there is more damage inside of you to undo. Like I said, inside of me, there's damage to undo. I went to Americanized school. I thought of myself as I would be one day a high frequency trading Goldman Sachs algorithm programmer at one point, because I was raised in an American, Western, pro-capitalist, pro-liberal democracy, white supremacist. All of the West is white supremacist, whether they are saying the N-word or not. Liberal, conservative, it's all white, in the sense that they identify whiteness and white Western civilization as above the others. So I was raised in a white culture by brown people, a lot of them, but they identify as Americans. And so I have to, like, every day I have to root out the blood quantum. And part of this blood quantum is that for indigenous people, the amount of blood inside of your body, that's not what makes you who you are. For Native Hawaiians, who your biological parent was, as I bring this up several times recently, who your biological parent was, is irrelevant. Or it's not fully relevant. Remember who carried you, and that's important. But in terms of who you are, that who took care of you, who nurtured you, who taught you, who communicated, who loved you, right? Who birthed you, that's one thing, and that's not nothing. But who nurtured you and gave you your life ways and taught you and who you existed with, who taught what language, who taught you language, who taught you the right and wrong, who taught you the values, that's who your kupuna, your elders are. And Hawaiians were, we were raised collectively. So the Hanai system is not adoption. It's really like a village that cares for the child. All children deserve care, and sometimes parents are in different situations, which is why you don't have just one nuclear family with two parents only raising the child a lot of the time, right? Grandma would often raise the kids, or grandpa or uncle, and this was a system. It's still around, really. It's very thinly buried under Western Christian heteronormative cis patriarchal nuclear family, child dismissing, unpeaceful parenting, let's say, sort of conceptions of family. And so what I'm saying is so the blood quantum is itself the blood quantum of you are indigenous, you're a Native Hawaiian because you have 1/4 of the blood of the parent. That is a Western colonial insertion. That is also foreign. That is not part of that whole concept of you are who you are because you have X amount of genes because of some twisted social Darwinistic pro-colonial, pro-genocidal theory for planetary annihilation and plunder called the colonial era, which is what, right? Blood quantum is a one subset of the human civilizational cancer that is the West. It is blood quantum is one putrefied arm of the human body, right? That is called all of biology, that is influenced by these concepts, and sociology and demographic establishment, influenced by the concept that people are made up of, their cultures, right, are made up of what percentage of quote unquote blood your parents had, right? Again, right? So blood quantum has another resonance just with that, right? And it was a method to eradicate all Native people, to replace them, right? It's really think of it that way. Blood quantum was a way to replace all healed normal humans, right, with Wendigos, with the people whose hunger cannot be filled, that destroy everything, right? It was replacing all the people, all socialists to be replaced with capitalists in one sense, but it also all people who think in collective terms of all good of all people and also the planet and also other organisms and our relatives, right? With people who only think of themselves or some small subset of self. So blood quantum was a method of cultural eradication. It's not really a method of eradicating the biological. It's not a method of eradicating the genetic phenotype of indigenous people. It's a method of eradicating the cultural and life ways and whatever was good about people. Actually, it seems to be a way. Oh, they're trying to target specifically people who have redder skin or this type of nose. That's not what it's about. It's right. That's what the scientists. This is part of the warpedness of Western incoherent, disinformational, malicious, all of its knowledge and all of its science. It's all warped by this, right? So it's not that there's a problem with scientific methods and science generally. That's another debate between indigenous people, indigenous scientists, and Western scientists is what gets to count as science, right? And a lot of times, indigenous people, we have a lot of science that is built into our languages and our cultures and our methods, especially of preservation of the environment, but lots of other sciences, medicinal sciences, etc. And you just don't count it as science because it's not in English and it doesn't have the kind of charts and graphs that you use specifically, or it's not proven, but but what is proven and what is disproven is biased towards what is seen to have come from the West and what benefits Western capitalist colonialism and racism. So anyway, in that sense, Blood Quantum is also saying something about that whole system as well, which is that it's kind of this weird thing where it's like the amount of blood in your body is not really what because by that what that's also saying is like if your indigeneity is not determined by biologically who gave birth to you, right? As just another example. If a pair of white parents give birth to two kids, one child is raised in a white suburb in California or in New York, and the other child doesn't see the parents and is raised in Hawaii by Hawaiian parents, right? To be Hawaiian, right? Or somewhere or raised in Africa to be a person in Africa, right? The two children, right? One of them will have American characteristics, and one of them, right, they'll look different in Hawaii. And we have lots of very fair skin and then very dark Hawaiians, right? One of them will be a completely different person. There's examples of this. Is that when there's a video, very good video, where there's a black person or African person in Hawaii. They're very dark skinned. Their parents were African Americans. They were adopted basically at infancy by a Native Hawaiian family in Hawaii, and for all intents and for the Hawaiians are like, when I look across the room and I see you, the person is feeling a little bit insecure because Black Lives Matter is happening, and they're like, I'm not sure if I'm accepted. But like all of their mannerisms, how they talk, their language they speak, their values, their culture, their history is all Hawaiian. It doesn't matter. Like it's not that the Hawaiians go, oh well, you don't throw your ancestors away. You acknowledge those were people that bore me, and that history is there too. But the people that have nurtured me and raised me and who I am is a Native Hawaiian. Despite I have African parents, despite I have Asian parents, and so you're not suddenly considered, oh, you're just an African person, and you'll never be full Hawaiian. But that's certainly what the United States, that's what Europe always done. The one drop rule, blood quantum, right? Oh, you're black. That just means that you are less than human. You're chattel slave, and it's not just there. Because science, because that's, if you observe in a empirical rational, the West is not it cannot be rational because it has racism, because it has capitalism. Capitalism infects everything, and it's the selfishness, the greed, and the racism that benefit this unhealed win-lose way, right? How can you be scientific at that point? I would argue indigenous science is more valid than Western science just because it is not infected with the biases of racism, capitalism, patriarchy, etc., that warp all knowledge. Right? It's part of why everything's fucking falling apart. And so blood quantum is also it's kind of it's obviously it's a horror movie, it's a zombie movie, but it's also kind of saying something else about the way in which the emphasis on the blood and the genetics, right, is itself part of it is, in one way you can read it is, the people who created the blood quantum and focus on the blood are the people that are constantly seeking out to eat and drink other people's blood. right? When like, but that focus on the genetic, the phenotypical, the expression of exactly what you look like, that focus on these kind of warped theories of evolution that justified fascism, that justified colonialism. These are all again, they're part of a Wendigo planetary lifeway that has differently infected or it infects the mind, right? In that sense, it's more important because the real problem is what infects your mind, what infects your body, what infects your mind and your psyche and your soul. When you are raised, when you are around, when you affiliate with, when you grow up in an unhealed culture, like any Western culture, right? And then when that is put into you, doesn't really matter what your phenotype is, right? That's how you have Obamas, right? That's how you have Kamala Harris's, right? That's how you have Andy Ngo. Andy Ngo is pro-fascist. These are Vietnamese. The Vietnamese fought the American, and they threw French. French are some of the most horrible colonizers. This is a funny thing. A lot of Westerners, they look up to France. France is even more racist than a lot of even Anglo-Saxons in many ways. I don't really want to say which one is worse, but I mean, they are even more in your face. Ho Chi Minh came to France and asked the French working class, the French left, and the French people generally, and he said, French people, work with us, the Vietnamese. Be part of your human family. Be part of your human family. We, the Vietnamese, have kicked out the highest form of capitalism, imperialism. We kicked the French. We kicked your rulers out. And then they kicked the Americans out with the loss of 1 million people. And the French looked at the Vietnamese and they said, all I see is a yellow monkey. That's basically what the French said. There's pictures of Ho Chi Minh walking away from Paris, shaking his head, as the French left are thumbing their nose at him, because they don't see. In fact, they say, like, actually, America is further along. If America is further along in conversations about the problems of racism, colorism, and colonialism than France is. It's like that's the joke. I mean, it's great that they're having the big strikes and general strikes, and there's some working class organizations. That's fine, but it's like they're like the French are like, we don't want to be infected by le wokeism, le wokeisme. That's what they call it, right? We don't want to be infected by that, and it's like, but part of the reason why that is because that's a good example. Just because you realize there are problems with hoarding of wealth and money specifically, that's not deep enough and radical enough, right, to root out all and undo all the problems that you have, right? If you don't negate the second in the Western left analysis, if you don't negate the secondary contradictions of racism, of sexism, and of anti-LGBTQ plus, and I would argue of human centrism, even, which is you have to think about all other species of the planet and the Earth itself as part of a relational network and ecology and planetary ahupua'a, right? If you don't think about all of it, right, then you can have anti-capitalist a country or worker cooperative that's producing fossil fuels and is overproducing and is destroying the environment. Still, capitalism is one piece of it. That's important. But then just thinking about that number, and also if you want to get rid of the capitalism, I also point out France has never gotten rid of capitalism. Vietnam did. France has never gotten rid of capitalism. Cuba has gone on the socialist path. France is over there fucking letting its Macrons run things, and then they burn the country down, and then once they get a raise, then they go home. They're not burning out the country down the France are not burning the country down for Africa. France are not general striking, repairing relations with Vietnam. The French are not. I mean, it's great. The French are not in the streets for the peoples in South America and Central America. They don't even want to talk about race. The French are not in the streets because Muslims and black people are being killed and imprisoned 20 times more often than the French. The French are celebrating all the dead Muslims in the ocean off the coast of Greece. The French don't give a fuck. Most of them. I should say all of them. But that's the sense that I get. And the people that the people that are African in France are in the room. They're going, holy shit, man. Listen to us. I'm an African and I'm a black, I'm a Muslim in France. Holy shit. This is terrible racism. But the response is, no, I just want to raise and then I'm going to go home. So again, that's blood quantum. That's your French blood quantum. You know? That's the German blood quantum. They're going, we are not Asian. We are not, the Russians are Oriental. We are European, right? That's Brussels, right? That's the Austrian. That's the Finns going, we are going to get those Panzer tanks and we are going to fight to the last Finn for our Europeanness, for our great European Union. We are not Russian. The Russians are coming for us. The Russians are barbarians. The Russians are other. The Russians are evil, right? And America is, of course, pouring the gasoline on everybody's fires, going, yeah, no, totally. Here's another $100 million for your far right and for the National Endowment for Democracy. And here, Victoria Nuland is going to show up and make the fascist coup stick in your Ukraine. Now you're Finland. Japan, you don't want to go along? We're going to make a coup stick in Japan to put Shinzo Abe 2.0 back in power. Hey, Germany, your left is getting some anti-imperial power. U.S. is going to be right in there to push you back into your blood quantum mentality the second that you think you're going to start getting out of it, until you all die, just like Ukraine and just like Europe. That's Victoria Nuland's over there like, yep, we torpedoed the Nord Stream 2. These fucking idiot Europeans are all, think that they're going to win. We're eating Europe for lunch. We're selling them 4 times more expensive gas. You fucking idiots. Well, not all the Americans. The Americans that the most successful Americans at the top of your Greco-Roman, British, French, Star-Spangled Imperial complex. But I mean, my point is that like, if you still are looking at things based on some kind of cultural, racial divide, some people will say, well, the critical race theory and the quote unquote identity politics people and these wokeists, whatever, right? They're causing racial hatreds. We can't let children in 3rd grade in Florida be made uncomfortable because they're white. So we have to ban critical race theory. We have to ban all books because you're causing problems, right? But it's like children need to know. I mean, our kids know, they're very fair skinned. But again, that if your children were not raised, the fact that you think that, your skin color makes something inherently incorrect about you, that's already inside of your Western paradigm and your Western worldview. You've already abused your children the second that they think that your skin color is something that says something specifically about you. You've already hurt your children. Before the white child gets to the trans Afro-Indigenous teacher in 3rd grade in Lincoln Elementary School or Bolsonaro Elementary School. Bolsonaro is doing podcasts around America. I love it because, America is just showing who it is. It loves fascists like Bolsonaro. So, then you know what you got to do. But when the 3rd grader gets into that, when they see a school called Thomas Jefferson School, they're already being abused because they're being disinformed that Thomas Jefferson was not a racist, genocidal murderer who doesn't deserve to be read ever because he was a plagiarist, like J.K. Rowling. All the great Western thinkers, J.K. Rowling, turf, racist, plagiarist of the worst witch. And then so I keep getting the name of that book wrong. And then there's Thomas Jefferson, plagiarist, racist, sexist, murderer, genocider, 14-year-old child rapist, right? Plagiarist of indigenous people. So the second you get to that school and you see Thomas Jefferson, that's the first abuse of children. You shouldn't be able to. There should not be any Jefferson, Jackson, Abraham Lincoln on your dollar bills, on the sides of schools, anywhere. Those people are horrible. You already are. You're rewriting history. You're creating broken people. You are breaking your children every time they make them look at a dollar bill, the side of a school, or anything American. American flag. They see that and they tear it up. You already have broken your children. You've lied to them. You've lied to your children that there's something positive. You haven't told them the truth. So making the children the children before they've gotten to school, they've already been abused. They've already been hurt. They've already been made into mini Wendigos by being raised by those parents. When the Afro-Indigenous CRT educator is just starting to tell you, hey, you know, there's this history of racism, and this is the settler colonialism. This is what it is, right? That's the beginning of trying to heal. But the West is saying, no, we can't do that because that's harming children. You're harming, and maybe the LGBTQ plus teacher is grooming the children, right? So, the United States is never going to come out of that. I don't know what's going to happen in Europe, but the United States is a settler colonial project, and it unfortunately is never going to come out. Now, there are going to be indigenous. I shouldn't say what and how it's going to look in the United States 10 years from now, but what I can tell you is that indigenous people, land back is not really optional in that sense. You know, let me just one more time. The United States overwhelmingly is pro-capitalist, denounces socialism. It will never be it's saying we're never going to be a socialist country. Even this deep in the game, as capitalism falls apart, they are saying we are going down with that Titanic. So the question is not really, are white people going to suddenly jump after being diseducated by their entire existence, being made into Wendigos, right? By rooting themselves in their Western Greco-Roman classics, and then their Jeffersonian forefathers, and their Douglas MacArthur 20th century American empire, right, of genocidal murderers. White people are not just gonna magically, right, like the French, they're not just gonna magically jump to the side of indigenous. What's gonna happen is the U.S. is gonna fall apart, and increasingly, indigenous people who still have the capacity to work in a collective way, who are going to be a link between the global South and East. That's the global socialist world, the global indigenous led. So the Chinese were colonized, South Central America colonized, Africa colonized, Pacific colonized, Europeans the colonizers. Turtle Island is very important. North Turtle Island is very important because that is one of the great intersection points. It's actually really one of the major points. That is where you have an entire indigenous continent and an entire colonizer continent on top of the other one. And so, what's going to happen is your $12 eggs is a result of the United States beginning to morph the cancer, the 270 million people, not the people themselves. Again, it's about their ideas in their head. It's about the culture, the kupuna that nurtured them, the elders that nurtured them, ideologically, spiritually, and literally the parents that nurtured them. Not because they have Caucasoid. They went to Ancestry.com, and 95% of them, their ancestors date back to Sweden, or the Caucasus Mountains or some bullshit. No, it's because the lifeways that have been injected and the way they've been educated and raised and reared, and the culture that they continue to exist in around water coolers, and when they come up to their kitchen table, in their Discord, in their Twitch streams, right, and else that entire milieu that they swim in. Their aquariums, right? The aquariums is breaking. It's falling apart. And America is saying, well, no, it's fine. It's fine. It's really fine. Don't worry about it. Yeah, you're flopping around. You got no food. Your eggs is $15. Yeah, the cops are shooting white people in trees at Cop City. Don't worry about it. Don't worry. White people are worrying about it, though. They're going to get more worried about it because it is an entire settler colony. Peru and Bolivia, very important. 60% indigenous people in Bolivia and Peru. I would argue, as I said before, it's more like indigenism with socialist characteristics than socialism with indigenous characteristics. Bolivia and Peru are the two most successful South American countries right now in coming out, in alleviating millions of people's poverty, building socialism, pushing out imperialism and fascism. They are 60% indigenous. Majority indigenous. Hawaii, 50, 60% non-white. They're only 25% white in Hawaii, and about 40% Asian, but they're kind of in the middle. That's the important fight. It is. Some of them are like, oh, maybe we should just be Japanese Americans. Maybe we should be like Danny Noy. That's why they put Danny Noy as the greatest U.S. senator that backed all the wars ever, right? They have pictures of him all over Pearl Harbor, right? Because they were trying to manufacture. They were trying to blood quantum. They were trying to nurture to the dark root of Greco-Roman, American, British, Western, capitalist U.S. empire, all the Japanese and all the Japanese and Korean and Chinese and all the people that are escaping all the war zones, all of Andy Ngo's relatives coming out because they wanted to be capitalist Westerners and selfish, right? rather than the collectivist Vietnamese that have $4 insulin, universal health care, 1,000 times less homelessness than California, etc. And so the U.S. took all those Asians, dumped them in Hawaii, and they manufactured with all of the froth of all of their nightmarish wars in East Asia. They dumped all of the worst elements into Hawaii, made them into white people, put Danny Inouye in charge to glue it, as Victoria Nuland of the U.S. Biden administration, a neocon might say, to glue the fraudulent U.S. state of Hawaii together, and then told all the Hawaiians, shut up Hawaiians, or we're going to put you in prison and kill you. We're the most over-incarcerated and over-murdered by the police in the United States. 4 times more likely to go to prison. But Hawaii is falling apart. And so the way that Peru and Bolivia and Peru are falling apart because the West is falling apart, the empire, the U.S. and its NATO and its imperialist allies are falling apart. The Central and South America are building a trade currency. There's Latin America, Peru, Bolivia, Argentina, Brazil, even Colombia is going left. Colombia is an important murder squad for Mr. Biden. He set them up to kill thousands of indigenous people there. Going left. Bolsonaro is over there hanging out, eating fucking KFC in Florida. The fascist U.S. The U.S. is losing around the world. Around Americans they don't know. It would be nice if some Americans got an education someday. I'm hoping one day, maybe 200 years from now. But unfortunately, there won't be in America then. But people who exist in North Turtle Island will have an education soon. I think some of them. I hope most of them, because if they knew what was happening, what you're going to see is Bolivia and Peru are going to be more and more successful. They're reintegrating with all of Central South America. The wider the country in South America, the less likely it is to have moved, you see, right? Places, they're all moving, but they're moving more slowly and at different rates and at different levels of success. Vietnam is 98% indigenous Vietnamese. And it's about 1% French and 1% Chinese and other white. And Vietnamese has full socialism, has full universal, all this. I gave you the statistics already. Right? China is 99% indigenous Chinese, and China has the similar statistics to Vietnam, the world's greatest poverty alleviation, and it's more important because China is very important because it's the planetary liberation for the world's people. Africa, South America, #1 trading partner, giving them non-Western debt trap. That's why Janet Yellen is in Africa, trying to re-solidify Western imperial control. Right? So the United States is going to take longer, but I don't know. The Berlin Wall, they thought it would take 10 years, but it only fell in less than 24 hours. A brick was gone, and then the whole wall vaporized, or it was a pile of rubble, right? The United States is going faster and faster and faster. The U.S. military projected 2035. After the Trump administration, he shortened the U.S. life expectancy by 7 years. It was 2027, 2028, where China was going to surpass. Biden is shortening that life expectancy every day. Not Biden. The West and its U.S. and its abject mediocrity or sub-mediocrity that runs it. All the Elons that run the Pentagon and these idiots, they barely can hold themselves. They've completely lost in Ukraine. They're not going to get their war going in Europe, in Asia. Not to the extent that they want. It's looking less and less. The Philippines, they're trying to double the military bases in the Philippines right now. But anyway, so long story short, I've already retread that territory. I'm gonna take this off. So it's not the blood of the Quechua and the Aymara or the Native Hawaiians or the indigenous people of Peru. Not the biological blood. Again, very important. It's not the biological blood. It's the culture. It's the lifeways. It's their history. It is the economic analysis. It is the indigenous economic analysis, sometimes called Marxist analysis. There are indigenous Marxist analysis too that identify that way. It's not really that important, right? What matters is like that the peoples can connect back to a healed human culture, political, social, economic way of being that is mass understood. They have a language to go along with that. The language has in it the values embedded in the words are constructed. There is no possible way. The concept of the fight over pronouns right? This fight over pronouns. It's not just about pronouns. It's a fight against patriarchal, cis heteronormative culture that is one of the tentacles of cancer of the Western way, right? But the fight over the pronouns is not even possible in Hawaiian because there's only one pronoun, not just for he and she, ya, the pronoun, and it's similar for many other languages, Austronesian people and Asian people as well. Ya, there's a similar one in Chinese, in fact. It's not the same. But the Austronesian language has one pronoun for the peoples of, in Chinese, I think it's ta is a similar pronoun in some Chinese language. But in Hawaiian, ya is he, she, and it's also it. So it actually, in the language, you have gender neutrality, you have gender spectrum, you have gender fluidity, you have anti-patriarchy, gender equality, and you have the environmental respect embedded in the language. Just learning the Hawaiian language, your mind literally gets your entire cosmology and your worldview, your entire the way that reality is constructed in your mind gets reshifted in the directions that it needs to be. As I said, the entire English, French, Spanish, and Roman and Greek languages are baked. They are constructed of their bloody Wendigo cancerous history. That doesn't make it impossible to heal while speaking English, but it does make it tricky and difficult and hard. And it's the one that we have. It's the one that I have because my family was genocided by the United States. But that's why that's one reason why it's Peru and Bolivia, and it's Vietnam and China, and it's Hawaii, and it's a lot of other islands that are going at the speed, at the rate, and at the success level that they are. And there is no socialism with American characteristics. Let me just say that again. There will never be socialism with American characteristics. There could be socialism with there's socialism with Cherokee characteristics. There's socialism with Pawnee characteristics. There's socialism with Yaqui characteristics. There's socialism with Haida characteristics, with Quechua characteristics. There's 500-year-old leftist analysis that said Marx was too thin. Jose Carlos Mariátegui is one of them. He's a South American indigenous philosopher and economist who said Marxism is a bad plagiarism, and it was called out in the time, but the West doesn't bring up indigenous people ever, let alone in economics departments or leftist discussion generally, right? But the reality is there is socialism with all these other indigenous characteristics, and in fact, I would argue the indigenous cultures are very important to manifesting the socialist character, the socialism in those places. But the United States is not a project that it can possibly, and it's telling you to your face, there will never be patriot socialism. There will never be MAGA communism or Trump populism or fascist, imperial, settler, colonial, genocidal, pro-slavery with good healthcare and health. That's never going to happen. That's never going to happen. The U.S. is not going to be around much longer, as I already said. So I feel like I've said what I wanted to say, and I'm just going off. So let me just end. But anyways, Blood Quantum is a show, and I'm not going to tell you the whole ending, but it's a very good zombie survival horror movie, and it is a show that it's the best dystopian movie. The Last of Us is nothing compared to this. This movie is very important. The Last of Us is entertaining, and Pedro Pascal is also a survivor of a U.S. Racist, colonial, pro-capitalist murder squads. His parents survived the U.S. destruction of Allende and the left in Chile, and so Pedro Pascal, he knows that, and The Last of Us is fine and it's entertaining, but Blood Quantum is an actually important movie, and its narrative and what it's trying to say is an important, and I don't say that about a lot of shows. Usually I'm like, this one got problems, man. But Blood Quantum it is a dystopia that is true to history and true to saying things that need to be said, conveying the meta narrative that needs to be conveyed in the current time, like Reservation Dogs. So if you don't like zombie movies, don't feel like you gotta watch it or something. Holly is not watching it because Holly, it's the zombie movies and Holly don't gel well. But I do highly recommend it, and it's already 140, so I should probably go. Anyways, everything. Don't forget. I'll play the Neofeud trailer real quick. Here is a video game that supports everything that we do here. That is a cyberpunk adventure game. That's about all the things I'm talking about, but just in a fun adventure game. Don't forget, if you appreciate the education that we try to do, consider supporting us through Ko-Fi, Patreon, or grabbing any of these Silver Spook games and music. And I'll be right back.
The Illuminati created us. They wanted to build a god with their own hands, and instead they created us.
Just because I'm made of silicone and aluminium, I must be doing something wrong. That's machine stereotyping, that is.
That's reality, that is. Machines are second-class citizens.
Humans are sentient persons by default, ma'am. They have personhood by heredity.
There are thousands upon thousands of overqualified slum dwellers. You are my peon. Don't you get it?
This wasn't a job. It was always just an excommunication sentence.
We're pawns in a feud bigger than we can imagine. Turn the cogs of the machine before Leviathan grinds you up and swallows you and yours.
We don't get to choose our hand, comrade. Prince, peon, rich, poor, human, robot.
I invented the crux of the royal's power, the secret to consciousness, our existence itself, the meaning of life.
I'm the $6 billion baller. Not some troubled youth.
You are my greatest creation of all.
I had to build my own family. I hate your son. I hate your son.
I'm happy to smash all of the crowns and throw the gold shards down to the people. I will be the iconoclast queen.
But who makes you queen anyway? You? You and whose army, princess? You and whose army?
So anyways, oops. Yeah, so Neofeud is out on itch. It is on Steam. Does support everything that we do here. It is a game that is it's like a dystopic cyberpunk adventure game in the vein of Blade Runner, with Game of Thrones political intrigue and hand-painted stylized visuals. I did create this entire video game myself. It is with the exception of half the voice acting and the testing of the game. It's like Disco Elysium, but with more cyberpunk characteristics. It's like Detroit Become Human, but not made by a AAA game company, or Stray without a cat protagonist. And so Neofeud is also a game that if you can leave even a very short review, it is greatly appreciated. Neofeud is also it does support the Silver Spook Cooperative here on the illegally occupied by the United States portions of the Big Island that we live on. Well, I should say all of Hawaii is illegally occupied, but Neofeud is also on itch and on Steam, on itch for Windows, Mac, and Linux, and you can also grab that game on sale or get it with the Silver Spook bundle. And also, you can get Decolonate. Speaking of our Asian relatives, and this Decolonators is like Blood Quantum, but like country-sized. The entire country is like, no, land back, no more capitalist colonizations. So anyways, Decolonators is a retro arcade game that you can get, and it is also on itch. And that, of course, we have Indigistar. If you're like, if you like shorter adventure games that are about collective culture, indigenous people living together and not engaging in self-centered culture and war and slavery, etc., but in a science fictional package, Indigistar is a game that from an indigenous person about those topics, but more in a short adventure game. And then also there is Pigeon with Gun, which is a game where you basically shoot at gajillionaires in giant robot suits. And then there's Woman, that is by Holly. Holly is an author. So I'm just going to say, until Holly tells me, don't introduce me as an author. Unlike that Reddit dickhead, Holly actually writes books and Holly puts books out there, and that's what makes you an author. So Holly is an author, and one of the books Holly wrote is Woman. Holly was a person raised in right-wing evangelical Protestant Christianity, and this is a book that's about dunking on that kind of culture in a short 2,000-word approximately book that is free, or you can also throw some money our way when you buy that book. Also, you can, as I said, support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Neofeud. It does increase it gives us the support that we need to keep on putting the streams and keeping the lights on, keep us paying the bills that we still have to pay. I wish that we didn't have to survive the apocalypse still of the capitalist colonial reality, but they still charge us for electricity. We had basically free electricity and free housing in the 1800s in Hawaii, but as long as the U.S. keeps occupying Hawaii, we could use your support. If as your colonizer country continues to make it hard for us to educate, as I said, even as hard as we Native Hawaiians get hurt by the United States, by the West and all their beneficiaries, we still try our best to educate and do the work we can and stop the climate destruction, environment destruction, and build, existing socialism again. So consider helping us to do that and get land back here in Hawaii, and also keep the Silver Spook Cooperative going. You get access to the Discord, Silver Spook University, which is 1,000 hours plus of my content categorized in a more convenient way, plus the text and video content. And you also get behind the scenes updates on Neofeud 2, which I'll be showing some of those. I will be showing some of those later on today. And also, you can follow at Silver Spook Guy or at Silver Spook Games on Mastodon, at Silver Spook Games at mastodon.social, and at Silver Spook Games at octodon.social on Mastodon. And on Twitter, you can follow at Silver Spook Guy or at Silver Spook Games for the game stuff. And we also have Instagram, Facebook, and also we have we have sites all over the place. And I also have this other site. I'm doing this out of order, so I always mess that up. You can follow Terminus C at Terminus C for Terminus Cyberstar, a low-poly cyberpunk Deus Ex System Shock like game that I am the content director and lead writer of. So that's another game that is a Silver Spook game coming sometime in the near future. And so don't forget, you can check that out on Terminus C. You can join the Discord. And you can also follow Holly at the Tech Fairy. Wait, what? Hold up. Wait. Something is broken. There it is. I don't know why that was hard to find. You can follow at the Tech Fairy. Holly is the mod voice actor partner here at the Silver Spook Cooperative, producer, writer, and moderator for Zion Attack or The Lounge, which is a Twitch stream variety and music, digital interactive cabaret show. And also you can get Holly's a writer and educator, primary caregiver, parent, and author, as I said earlier, here at the Silver Spook Cooperative. Tweets and things like that. That's important for people to know. And also, in case you missed it, we were this week on Positive Leftist News. So if you where is that? So if you go to Positive Leftist News, PLN, do subscribe and follow them. I threw a lot of shade at the West and colonizers today, but the people the people who support us through Patreon and the people who put together Positive Leftist News, they know they are also here. They are also here for the end of settler colonial empires. And so, but Holly and I are on Positive Leftist News, and there is many Hawaii themes today, this week and this month. So don't forget to check us out at the Positive Leftist News channel, and Holly and I read the news from around the world. And I think that's. Oh, thanks a lot to all these people. No, fuck Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. But thank you to all these people on this list here. Your support is massively appreciated. The does help to keep us going, and yeah, makes everything that we do possible. And yeah, so we will be back in the evening time to talk about I don't know. I did want to play some music one of these days, either today or tomorrow. So either music and/or I'm gonna be showing some more Neofeud 2 update stuff. And have a good time wherever you are. Don't get bitten by a zombie. Don't get infected by that. Those capitalism and the racisms and imperialism and colonialism viruses. Though, just that's the worst part. You gotta keep your brain protected more so than just being bitten by zombies. You watch out for the Last of Us zombies too, though. That's dangerous.